The man was already tired of repeating many times that this was Princess Tortilla Noel Rias. It was the head of the oversight agency, a man named Aaron Clover. A man simply doesn't remember something so useless. This man is the 19th emperor of the Kairos Empire, Ethan Apuleius Kairos. Aaron said that this wedding is His Majesty's, so he does not understand how the princess of a neighboring state can organize the ceremony herself. This is no longer peace but war. The captain of the guard, Lucas Sever, remarked that he thought His Highness would prefer war. Aaron told him to shut up. Lucas thought he was joking, like he was saying that about Princess Tortilla. Her beauty is truly dazzling, and this is serious, but she wears a veil and her face cannot be seen. Lucas thought he was walking and didn't understand what he was talking about the aura. And also her mother, Leah Khalid, a girl famous on the server for her beauty. Lucas believed that she had most likely simply captured the heart of Jade Nears. Jade Nears, just like Tortilla, he's wonderful. He is both a great warrior and the greatest strategist in this world. There is no one who does not admire him, and there is no one who does not mourn his death. This man really looks like a god, and that means his daughter has come here. Aaron said that tonight is Princess Noel's first night, so he asks that they be more attentive to even the smallest gestures. Lucas noted that no matter what, she was still a married princess. Aaron informed the master that they were now deviating, and the emperor continued on his next journey alone. After this, the emperor entered the room where his lady was already waiting for him, with a veil on her face. She greeted His Highness Ethan Apuleius Kairos. She is the eldest daughter of Tortilla General Jade Nears and the first princess of Tortilla Noel Nears. It was a great honor for her. The emperor thought about her red hair and realized that was why they called her the Princess of Dawn. He noticed that it was very brave of her to look the emperor straight in the eyes, so he assumed she didn't value her life at all. The lady said yes, and then the emperor noticed that she looked very much like him and suggested that it seemed she had something to say. Noel said that she actually had something to say since she was here to make a deal. The emperor was surprised and remarked that it seemed she had a couple of extra lives. The emperor called her too arrogant. The lady said she'd been sold anyway, so she was living life to the fullest, so she wouldn't regret it later. So she has the nerve to ask for a deal, and she's willing to pay well. After this, the emperor suddenly pulled out his sword and pointed it at the lady. When the lady fell and was very embarrassed, he put away his blade. Noel hoped he would listen to her story. The emperor decided to sit next to her, and she noted that her life depended on what she said. Noel noted that she knew she was being held hostage here. Her life is in his hands, and they both know it could end today. Yet she's still here. Noel can only accept this, but she still wants to make her choice. And she came to surprise him. She wants to make a deal with him at the cost of her life. The emperor noted that for a deal to be made, both parties must agree, and he was confident that she could offer him something. The lady said that as long as she was Jade Near's daughter, the emperor decided to find out what she wanted from him. The sun god chosen by the gods, the great emperor of Kairos. Noel, for him, who is the defender of the East, offers his homeland Tortilla. The emperor was surprised and interested, so he asked what he should do for this. Noel said that to do this he must destroy her homeland. The emperor said that the destruction of this empire was very easy for him, but not for her. Tortilla is located beyond the Tartania mountain range to the north. It would be difficult to cross the terrain, and terrible weather would be a problem. That's why no one even tried to conquer the north for a long time. It doesn't matter how much supplies and food they take with them. There is no point in trying to cross this mountain range. To see the red walls of Tortilla, surrounded by forests and mountains, the lady turned to His Highness and asked whether he would still claim that it was so simple. Noel was born and raised in the north. She cut swords with her father on the battlefield. She also learned words with her mother in the forest and walked more than rode in a carriage. And she spent less time in Tortilla Castle than in its surroundings. Tortilla will be the biggest obstacle to Kairos's conquest of the north. No one but her can help conquer Tortilla, and she will tell you everything she knows about the server. So she asks His Highness to use her. She asks him to unite the world beyond this high mountain range. The emperor was tired and remarked that this was very stupid. Since she was the princess of Tortilla, she could talk to him like that. And even so, she asks for the destruction of her country. Then the people will shame her. The princess laughed and remarked that it seemed he had misunderstood her. Noel just remembers what she got from them. Nothing, which means she owes nothing. She asked what they did when her father died, and where they were when her mother was vomiting blood and dying. All that remained was revenge. If he wiped Tortilla off the map, if he stained these lands with blood, then she would do anything for him. Noel asked him to take her hand, and the emperor saw that she valued it very much. He grabbed her hand so the girl thought that he agreed to this deal. The emperor said that at least for today he agreed. Noel asked if she could ask why the emperor asked if it really mattered. The girl denied it, so he kissed her hand, and she thought that the name of the Sun Emperor really suited him very well. Ethan asked why she was so fickle. He was also glad to welcome her to Kairos. Noel smiled and promised to pay her full respects to His Highness. The emperor thought they were finished, so he suggested they rest now. Or maybe she wanted to say something else. The emperor asked if he needed to explain what a girl and a man could do at night. The lady said that she understood everything, so the emperor asked her to be a little more serious. In Tortilla, there is a custom. Husband and wife drink wine at the end of the day. Their children will also drink with them when they grow up. Her father loved her very much, and even took her with him to the battlefield so that she could pour him a drink. She said that the drink was much better, but suddenly the emperor dragged her to his place. Noelle asked if she should take off her shirt. The emperor told her to simply purse her lips. After that, they had a passionate kiss. Ethan told her to relax, gentlemen. I don't understand what she should do. Noel asked him to wait, but the emperor said that since she said she understood everything, she should not be dissatisfied. The lady confirmed this, but that is exactly why she has them. The emperor took off his shirt and asked her to look at his muscles and say it again. The princess was shocked when she saw his body. She remarked that it was very wonderful. The emperor asked if it was supposed to come out of her mouth at that exact moment. The lady noted that it was a compliment, but he was not pleased with it, and he added that one should not casually touch the emperor's body. Noel asked him to stop, but the emperor said again that he had already said that he could not be touched. Noel wanted to tell him something, and the emperor said that he was listening to her carefully. He also added that she was very thin, but she was a princess, and he couldn't believe that it was so difficult to feed her in her empire. Noel admitted that she was always treated with disdain. The emperor remembered how Aaron had said that all this time she had lived in captivity on the territory of Tortilla Castle because General Jade Nears of Tortilla was poisoned and her mother was killed. The king of Tortilla is deeply terrified by the murder of his half-brother. Over time, the authorities came to the decision to imprison the princess in order to stop the unrest among the people. And this time, as a sign of reconciliation, he sent the princess instead of his daughter. Noel pointed out that he knew it anyway. She turned to him and said that she did not want to be his puppet and did not want to be his woman. The emperor was simply horrified, and the girl added that she did not want to become one of his concubines. It's all because she doesn't want to waste her energy and time fighting with his women. Then, from a curse that appeared on his path, she will turn into a faithful courtier who can help. The emperor was tired and amused by the fact that she said she would be a faithful courtier. Such blind love of the emperor's women always ends in a rain of blood. If this is true, then I wonder what it was like for the previous emperor of Kairos. Noel said that there is 1 Karelin, 3 Akaroi, 9 Akasis, and 28 concubines. Karelin is the queen of the empire. Akasis is the one who gave birth to the prince, Akaroi. Akasis is the emperor's wife. But only 2 precious princes were able to grow up in the imperial family. It's unclear how many princes and princesses died. His mother cried profusely over this, and she asked how many deaths he'd witnessed. She asked who else could understand this pain, but the emperor shouted that it was too noisy. Ethan won't tolerate this disrespect any longer. The mistress said she could stop at any moment. She doesn't want to risk her life over her feelings, and be disappointed that it won't last forever. She won't ask for his love, so she is not a woman to him, but an assistant, and therefore asks him to let her stand by his side to protect his whole life. Temperature noted that she would regret this decision, but the girl said that this was her destiny. This intellect is strong, but she is also quite simple. He wants to find out just how smart this girl is, so he said she could just do whatever she wanted. Noel asked if he was going to sleep here, because she had heard that he didn't like to spend the night in the harem palace. The emperor noted that people were changing, and then grabbed her hand and told her not to stare at him because it was making him uncomfortable. The lady asked if he was uncomfortable. She had simply never slept with a man before. The emperor noted that if she slept with someone, she would instantly destroy the country. Noel feels protected, after which she said goodnight to the master. She didn't want her to say it was uncomfortable. He didn't feel any protection. The woman was simply horrified when she learned that he did not return to the main palace. The emperor's wife, Aris Molb, who was an Akasis, began to destroy everything because she was furious. They say His Majesty sleeps in the room of the new Akasis. Eris didn't understand why he was doing this, because he didn't even look at her. The maid tried to tell her mistress not to worry. There were rumors that the new Akasis had been sold to the palace. The dowry was given to the emperor, so she had no money left. She was just a princess in a small country, but she could become the emperor's #1 woman. Her Highness Aris is from the powerful Molb family. The girl said that's why she was surprised. He ignored a member of the Molb family in favor of a woman from the north. The family of the emperor's wife made enormous contributions to the country's founding, and many emperors descended from them. In addition, Her Highness Aris loves His Majesty very much, and being next to His Majesty should belong to Her Highness Aris. The maid said he did it on a whim, and she thought she knew it. Aris ordered her to call her brother immediately, because she couldn't just let this all go on its own. The lady promised to go immediately and send a message to the Molb family. Aris also ordered that the woman be summoned. She wants to finally see her face, so she ordered to tell the woman that she demands to meet her. Noel was surprised that His Highness woke up and immediately greeted him. The emperor remarked that it was a very fine morning and that he had not slept so well for a long time. He's really comfortable. It doesn't even look like he had trouble sleeping. Noel thought he was already leaving. The emperor asked if she really wanted him to leave. The lady said that she was wrong. I just don't know what to do next. She asked what the emperor usually did in the morning. She was very embarrassed. Ethan suggested they eat first. He used a special bell to summon the servants. A maid immediately entered the room, and he ordered her to set the table for them here. The maid was very surprised and asked if the emperor was sure that he wanted her to set the table here. The emperor said that he was completely confident and ordered that he not be forced to repeat himself. The maid apologized and promised to fix everything immediately. Ethan asked the girl to let him know if she had any requests. According to the traditions of the imperial family, a girl who spent her first night with the emperor should receive something. Usually it's jewelry, sometimes a territory or a castle, and it depends on the favor that evening. Noel realized that if that were the case, she would get nothing. The emperor was pleased, because fortunately, she understood this. But the lady didn't understand why he'd asked about it. Then Ethan said there were things she didn't understand. He hadn't done anything to her of his own free will. If they had spent a sleepless night, it would have been much worse. Now the lady understood everything and asked how to do it. She's just using a lamp. The girl took the lamp and cut her hand. The emperor in horror screamed and asked what she was doing. The girl said that then no one would have any questions. The emperor ordered her not to say anything and bandaged her wound with a handkerchief. She went over to his side, so now she is in his hands, and no one can touch his subordinates. Everything is the same with her. She shouldn't do this anymore, otherwise he won't forgive her. The emperor asked her to promise him. Noel began to believe he valued her, so she agreed. Noel apologized and noted that she looked rather sloppy, but in any case, she was very grateful and touched. The gentleman said that there was no need to thank him. She should think better about her actions. Noel promised to think about it. Ethan decided to find out what she wanted after all. The girl said she didn't need anything. The emperor said that if she had forgotten, she should know that such a chance would never come again. So he asked her to think about it and answer him. Noel repeated once again that she really didn't need anything. She only has a room and some jewelry, and he thinks that rumors about me have already spread. He was surprised that she didn't know that wealth is where all power lies. Apparently, she had already forgotten that she was in the palace of the empire. And then the girl said that she knew what she wanted, and she needed only one thing. Noel asked again if he could agree to everything. The gentleman said that first she had to say what it was. The lady remarked that she thought she shouldn't say this, but after thinking for a moment, she realized that His Highness was capable of it. The emperor, horrified, asked again what it was, and also noted that he was not saying no. He just wanted to know what she wanted. Noel asked His Highness to grant her freedom. She wants to be free here in the imperial family. The emperor thought she wanted to leave. Noel said no, absolutely not. She's his Acasis, temperature moved, and asked if she wanted to be free as Emperor Kairos's Acasis. He noticed that she had quite huge ambitions. She thought that this was normal, and that she wanted freedom of movement, at least within the imperial family. The emperor needed to know more specifically, not so vaguely. He wanted to know where she wanted to go. Noelle wanted to go to the library. The gentleman asked again, and she also said that she wanted to go to the library of the imperial family of Kairos. The Imperial Library of Kairos, Veritas, houses the books collected by previous emperors. These books may only be read by members of the imperial family or the current emperor. Even high-ranking officials cannot get in there. The emperor noted that she really does not know the word fear. The gentleman said it would be difficult to accomplish. Noel was shocked, unsure if it was truly too difficult for him. The gentleman agreed, and so she was happy. But she would go there alone. The girl was very surprised, and asked again. The emperor told her to be very careful and not get caught. Noel was shocked with you that he wants her to get in there secret, because it is impossible to get in there. The emperor said that, at least if she was caught, he would cover for her. Noel was already asking what would happen if he didn't cover for her. In that case, she would die. He noticed that she seemed very displeased, but the girl said that was not true. Ethan was sure she was displeased, but she denied it again. The emperor silenced her with a kiss, after which he asked if she would really be so surprised all the time. Noel noted that this could be the case, as she was a bit impressionable, and indeed she's only a little dissatisfied. But God doesn't care. The emperor thought that perhaps they should try something more impressive. Sarah came into the room and asked if Mrs. Knoll had slept well. The girl said that she was grateful for the concern, and confirmed that she was fine. The maid just does what she has to do, and fortunately, the mistress has no complaints. Noel noted that there was only one thing she wanted to take away. The staff she had too many servants now. Sarah noticed that her maids had already been selected. If I don't like someone, she can simply replace them. But that's not what the lady had in mind. Noel said that only her people would be allowed into her room, and she doesn't want the maids to watch her, so she ordered everyone to leave. This was her first order. The servants understood her and decided to leave. The lady also said that I need to call the maids one by one. She will monitor them herself and decide which one to choose. She hoped there wouldn't be any problems with this. Sarah had told her a month ago that everything would be ready by morning. After which, the lady thanked Sarah, who did not understand why she should be thanked, since she had simply made a request. She's been serving in the palace for many years, but this is the first time she's seen her. She's smart. Noel remarked that she felt like Sarah wanted to tell her something. The maid apologized and said that it was indeed so. The mistress was completely attentive. Sarah said she didn't need to use such terms when addressing services and maids. The master must behave like a master, and the servants must respect him and show everyone who she is. This is how the hierarchy works in the palace. Noel explained that she wasn't from around here and needed someone to help her, so that's how they did it. Sarah also added that the lady was very smart because she knew in advance that there were a lot of extra eyes here. However, they are not just watching her, but will watch for every mistake, watch her every action. Therefore, Sarah asks Mrs. not to put herself down and not show that she is simple. Sarah believed that this mistress was the most powerful person in the harem, so she must take care of herself. Noel was grateful again, and the maid was surprised that she thanked her again. The lady also added that she should not worry, because she would speak correctly to the young maids, but she could not behave like that with those who were older than her. Sarah tried to say something, but the lady said that this was the etiquette of her country, so she asked to understand her, because she did not address her like that at all, and Noel coped with the consequences during difficult times. Sarah understood everything, so the mistress suggested going to her new servant. Lucas burst into the emperor's office and shouted that he had heard that the Lord had spent the night with the Acasis, and he wanted to know if it was true. Rumors of this had already spread everywhere. Aaron ordered him to shut up. Lucas was shocked, because this was not typical behavior for His Majesty, and even considering that he had been training upon hearing this, he immediately rushed here. He also added that he wanted to hear a lot of rumors that she looked like a goddess, and he wanted to know if it was true. Ethan didn't understand what was going on, and why he was so stubborn. Since the emperor did not react in any way, the man realized that it seemed like these were just rumors. Aaron ordered him to get out, and he sat down on the sofa, upset. Aaron asked His Majesty in horror if there were any problems with this woman. If they exist, they can help. But the emperor firmly stated that there were no problems. In fact, she really is beautiful. The emperor remembered her. Her eyes are especially beautiful. She is the Princess of Dawn. Ethan remarked that it was a fitting name. Lucas asked why she'd spent the night with him if she didn't look like a goddess. The master has never allowed anyone to do this before. This is indeed true. But it was all because he wanted to sleep. Aaron was surprised because the gentleman could go 2 days without sleep and feel fine. And then suddenly, he wanted to. Besides, he slept with someone he'd never seen before. He'd never shared a bed with anyone before. Perhaps this really was just a sudden whim. The emperor remembered what he had wanted to say. Regarding the request to the new Akasis, the man said she wanted a good maid assigned to her. The emperor allowed Sarah to enter. Lucas had no idea where the maid was coming from. The woman greeted him and said that she was Sarah, the chief maid of the palace, and had arrived by order of His Majesty. The men were surprised, because he never worried about the lives of the people in the palace. Now he personally chooses the best maid for someone, unless it is some kind of sudden whim. 7 hours ago, the lady greeted many women and introduced herself as the Princess of Tortilla. Dila was the first to introduce herself. Although she doesn't have any special talents, she handles all the housework perfectly. The girl was confident she could overcome all difficulties. The lady was pleased to hear this, and she was very fond of cleanliness. Next up is Anna, the culinary department. She loves to cook and is confident that no one can do it better than her. Noel also loves good food, so she told her to cook whatever she wanted. Anna was very happy and promised that she would treat Her Highness to the most delicious food. Next up is Penny. She's in charge of the financial inner palace. Her father was a businessman, and she is not very good at everything else. She can solve any financial problem. She is also excellent at managing finances. Heather. They had already seen each other on the mistress's wedding day. The girl was very pleased that the mistress remembered her. She heads the palace's clothing department and will be responsible for ensuring that her appearance amazes everyone. The lady remarked that in that case, she was counting on her and thought that the days in the Seremnir would be pleasant. Seremnir is Noel's palace. Sierra is from Cyrus III's army. Before the mistress chooses her, she swears to protect the Akasis with her life. Noel pointed out that she shouldn't risk her life for her. The knight's hands were all calloused. Noel said she should know the value of her life, so she suggested trying to live as long as possible. The maid reported that Akasis had finally chosen her servant. Lucas was surprised to hear it was only 5 people. He thought that was a bit too few. Sarah said that these 5 would be better than those 50. The emperor pointed out that she had said that the young maids were too troublesome. This is true, but their true value had not yet been determined. First, Dila Mut, the youngest daughter of the Maid family, who have served the imperial palace since time immemorial. Dila's 20 brothers and sisters work at the imperial palace. If you count cousins, that's over 30 people. The Maid family is a veritable repository of information about the Kairos imperial palace. The emperor noted that they have the opportunity to collect rumors that his palaces are part of life. Indeed, that's true. Next up, Anna from the culinary department is very gluttonous and boring. Aaron asked Sarah if this woman had been demoted twice. This is Jeremy the butler. Sarah said she has the best cooking skills. She is on the same level as the chefs, and His Highness chose her food again. No one understood why she was able to do it, but everyone knows Anna is a very good cook. They can only imagine the boss's irritation. Sarah believed that if she became a personal servant, it would be a different matter. She knows His Majesty's taste so well, and she thinks she is very well suited for the Akasis. Aaron noticed there was another child with a familiar last name, Penny Docks. Aaron asked again if this was the same Docks as Sergeant Docks. Sarah said that this was true, and she was the eldest daughter of the Docks family, who received the title of Viscount 3 years ago. Lucas realized that this was a wealthy family, raised from commoner roots. When His Majesty bestowed upon them a title, the aristocrats were greatly irritated. But it was a good idea the family had a strong influence on the empire's economy. The emperor himself approved of this. Ethan noted that he knew about it, but he wondered why the daughter of the Docks family was a servant in the palace. Aaron believed that her father simply lacked warmth and wanted her to become the emperor's woman. Sarah said she didn't know what her father was like, but Penny wasn't like that. After all, she wanted to take over her father's business. The emperor ordered him to continue. Then the Lord remarked that His Highness had indeed greatly enjoyed the new Akasas. He looked so happy. Sarah also said that Noel's dowry is very low compared to others, so the likelihood of financial support from her is very low. But if Penny Docks becomes his woman, she will receive enormous support. Judging by her father, he'll be helping her both physically and mentally. It's getting more and more interesting. Lucas asked who was next. It was Heather Politant, the daughter of a raven, and her mother is very famous in high society. Heather has always kept an eye on the scores and things in her house, so she is very good at decorating. She'll be a great help to Noel, Aaron thought. And there, it looks like the puzzle isn't complete, but he has some guesses. And the final piece of the puzzle is Sierra Carlson. Lucas was completely shocked and asked if she was talking about those Carlsons. Carlson is one of the most famous military families that had a hand in founding the empire. From it came 4 generals and many knights who won a huge number of victories on the battlefield. Not only does this family win fencing competitions, but members of this family have always passed the general's exams. However, they did not know that this family had a daughter. Nosa said that few people know, but the Carlson family is predominantly male. But Sierra is a very strong child and deserves to bear that name. However, tradition dictates that a knight must choose his own master, and she has never acknowledged anyone before. She was demoted 3 times, after which she wasted 2 years. Lucas thought it was possible, and she chose a new Acaces. Sarah noted that this man must be aware of her true master. The emperor was her lord. He was the one who controlled her life, her destiny. She defended Acaces, whom she considered a worthy woman. Despite her gentleness and decency, she still decided to stand up for her. It was a manifestation of her fortitude. Sarah was adept at reading people. She quickly absorbed information, analyzed situations, and could make accurate assessments. Her skill in this field was no accident. Her Highness Hyona wasn't one to think about a harem either, and Noel was no exception. She would certainly have become a new target if she'd wanted to change anything in her life. Sarah recalled how one day a woman whose death had gone unnoticed tried to prove her fortitude. Sarah warned His Majesty not to forget that she had found herself in this abyss. Eris screamed, calling Noel an arrogant brat. She asked if she was going to turn against her, confident she could defeat her in any fight. Sarah was a maid in the imperial family and maintained a neutral stance toward all the ladies at court. She refused to take sides despite pressure from all sides. No matter how hard the women tried to win her over, Sarah remained true to her position. She was never inclined to take sides, preferring to remain neutral. The emperor noticed that this was unlike Sarah's behavior. She was always cautious in her actions. He wondered what could be behind her unexpected behavior. If this was indeed the case, it seemed Sarah had managed to win the headmaid's heart. This was quite an achievement, especially for someone who usually remained impartial. Sarah announced that she would invite Madame Acasis Noel. She was certain this meeting would be important and had no intention of delaying it for long. The lady noticed the noise outside and inquired about what was going on. She sensed tension in the air and that something important was about to happen. The maid announced that, judging by the appearance, Madame Acasis Aris had arrived. This was unexpected, as no one had warned of her visit. The noise in the hallway was clearly audible. Noel asked if that was true, and was shocked that Aris had arrived without any notice. This was unusual for her, as she always liked to plan everything in advance. The maid confirmed that Aris had indeed arrived, and Noel began to wonder what would happen if she refused to meet her. It could lead to a reprimand, or even more serious consequences. She had heard that Lady Aris had a bad reputation in palace circles, even among the servants. People said she was quite cruel and demanding of her subordinates. The maid couldn't understand how Aris had become such a sinister figure. In some situations, she was far more dangerous than the average street thug. At that moment, Aris entered the room and noted with obvious displeasure that Noel's quarters were too small. She politely commented that she hadn't expected to find such a setting. Aris seemed to be studying her opponent, trying to figure out who she was. She asked if Noel would like to greet her clearly, hoping for concessions from the new Acasis. Noel decided to test how long she could withstand this tension. She watched Aris closely, eagerly awaiting what would happen next, determined not to give in. Aris was certain that no one in this palace could be better than her. She believed she had to dominate this situation, forcing others to obey. Noel simply replied, "Hello." She introduced herself as politely as she could, but her words were devoid of unnecessary emotion. She had no intention of bending to Eris's demands. Eris was angry, believing this woman should have bowed her head before her. She had expected more respectful behavior, but was met only with calm and confidence. Noel calmly reminded him that she had already introduced herself, and now it was Eris's turn to do the same. She had no intention of being the one to humiliate herself in front of a higher-born lady. Eris was simply horrified, unable to understand how this could have happened. She asked again, unable to believe that Noel hadn't acknowledged her superiority. Noel calmly replied that it would have been impossible for her to refuse the greeting. She couldn't ignore the rules and respect that were commonplace. The maid screamed, reminding Noel to be more careful with her words. Aris was from the Molb family, one of the most influential in the imperial court. Noel stopped her, surprised that a servant could interrupt an Acaces. She thought the maid should have been more careful in her remarks. The maid quickly bowed her head and greeted Noel in submission, realizing she had made a mistake. All that remained was to follow her mistress's instructions. Eris was baffled as to why she had to greet someone like Noel. She couldn't understand how the woman could act so boldly toward her. Noel replied reservedly that she now knew who Eris was, and that it was her turn to introduce herself. It was a form of respect, but also a challenge. But Eris wasn't about to give in so easily. She entered Noel's chambers, uninvited, a rather brazen act, even by palace standards. Eris continued to act arrogantly, showing off in front of Noel, whom she didn't know. She considered herself superior to everyone else, which she tried to prove in this meeting. Eris's refusal to reveal her name only angered Noel. In response, she banished her from her chambers, deciding that such insolence was unworthy of respect. Eris was furious, unable to understand how this woman could dare treat her like that. She couldn't believe she'd been simply thrown out without so much as an apology. The woman who was stopped was full of rage. She tried to attack Noel, but her mistress's knight intervened just in time, stopping her before she could strike. Eris slapped the knight across the face and continued shouting that people like her shouldn't allow themselves to do such things. She couldn't understand how she could have ended up in such a situation. Noel calmly pointed out that she wasn't a slave and therefore had every right to stop her. It was her right and duty to defend her peace and her honor. Eris screamed that she couldn't tell the difference between what was allowed and what wasn't. She didn't understand why Noel was acting so arrogantly, refusing to acknowledge her authority. Noel, surprised, asked how she was different from Eris. After all, they were both Acaces, and status shouldn't have defined their relationship. Noel pointed out that Eris should understand this too. Despite her position and family, she shouldn't act as if she were above everyone else. Now that they were both Acaces, Noel believed that Eris should show more respect. Otherwise, their relationship could not continue on this level. If they'd been in Tortilla, Noel is sure there would have been a lot of blood on Eris's face. She wouldn't have allowed herself to behave so rudely in that situation. Noel hoped Eris would be more careful in the future. She understood that with women of this type, she had to be especially careful and decisive. If Eris continues to touch her people or enter her chambers without permission, the consequences will be far more complex. This won't end with just words. Eris was stunned by her actions. She couldn't understand how she had dared to do such a thing. Her thoughts raced, and she became increasingly aware of her own impudence, not understanding what she was doing. The maids whispered quietly, noticing Eris's sudden silence. They exchanged a multitude of rumors and gossip, including that His Majesty had also shown interest in Madame Noel. The girl thought about how many prying eyes there were around her. She realized that perhaps no one knew she was dyeing her hair red solely for this reason. It all seemed out of place. Things are happening in Tortilla even more horrific than her own situation. The fever killed his cousins, and yet he still sits on the throne despite such cruel acts. Princess Erica Rios was always the subject of discussion. It's embarrassing to even mention how she treated her relatives. She was a terrible person, and that was becoming increasingly clear. Noel felt like this woman was nothing compared to Erica. Noel decided to test her greeting, expecting a reaction that might reveal a lot. Eris was displeased and asked what this strange greeting was. At that moment, a servant entered the room, bringing news that gifts from His Majesty had been delivered for the new Akassis. The maid reported that the emperor had sent her not only gifts, but also letters written by the emperor himself. Aris couldn't hide her anger. Her face flushed with rage. Noel bowed and expressed her gratitude as she accepted the emperor's gifts. She expressed her deep appreciation for his favor and all the gestures he had shown her. The butler remarked with admiration that Noel's demeanor exuded elegance and grandeur. She carried herself with such composure that no one could help but feel insignificant. He emphasized that her steadfastness always left others in awe. She showed no fear, and her self-confidence only increased the respect others had for her. He was confident that His Majesty had made the right choice in choosing her. The butler respectfully informed her that it was a great honor for him to meet a woman like her. He was a senior official in the inner palace and assisted the emperor in managing affairs. This gave him a special status, and he was proud that the emperor had entrusted him with such an appointment. Eris was furious and unable to contain her emotions. She turned to Jeremy, asking if he could see what was happening. The man calmly replied that it was a great honor for him to meet her too. Aris, unable to contain her anger, asked if the gifts had really been sent by the emperor. All of this irritated her, and she couldn't believe what was happening around her. Jeremy confirmed that the gifts and letters had indeed been sent by the emperor. But Aris screamed, claiming he was lying, because the emperor always treated all girls equally. Aris angrily declared that the emperor always acted like that. He left immediately after finishing his business, and the gifts for the girls were always the same, including hers. But something was wrong, because the gifts for this particular girl were different, and Eris couldn't believe that the emperor had actually sent such unusual things. She began to scream that her master could not have done such a thing. She didn't believe that such gifts were truly from him. It all contradicted her notions of how an emperor should behave. The butler, noticing her anger, asked her to calm down. He reminded her that the rules regarding gifts in the imperial family were strict, and their quantity was determined solely by the emperor. He explained that even if Aris had asked why he still couldn't have given her an answer, this was part of the traditions and rules that everyone in the imperial palace must adhere to. Aris, still unsettled, tried to understand why things were happening the way they were. The maid suggested she go back, as there were too many people in the room, and the situation was becoming tense. Aris, holding back her rage, promised she would never forget what happened that day. Those events had left a deep imprint on her memory, and she intended to take them all back. That evening, reflecting on everything that had happened, Noel thought about the girl's words, about her not getting anything. Those words left a bad taste in her mouth, making her doubt. The emperor suddenly appeared behind her. He asked if he'd heard wrong. Noel was taken aback, not expecting him to appear, and asked a little nervously, since when had he been barging in like this? The emperor asked curiously if she liked his actions. Noel was a little embarrassed, but admitted that she liked it, though it was still too unexpected and sudden. The emperor agreed that perhaps it was too much, but he didn't touch her that night, and the next morning he sent her gifts. This was supposed to be a sign of his attention and concern for her. Noel reported that she had already received gifts, but the emperor, smiling, asked if she thought it was too much. He seemed to expect more from her confession of her feelings. Noel, sensing the tension, said she definitely had no intention of becoming his woman. This statement slightly surprised the emperor, and he noticed that she was not yet accustomed to his intimacy. The emperor added that he would never have allowed her to be his woman without her consent. He said this with a hint of sarcasm, trying to convey that everything depended on her decision, not his. He also said that the necklace she was wearing suited her very well. Noel, with a slight smile, replied that she had chosen it herself, which was true as she liked the accessory. Before meeting him, Noel prepared for a long time, carefully choosing her outfit and accessories. It was her way of showing her confidence and preparedness, but she didn't know how the emperor would react. The emperor, noticing her preparedness, asked if this meant she had been expecting him. This statement made Noel feel uneasy, and she quickly replied that it was not so. But the emperor, with a mysterious smile, noted that she had nowhere to run from him. This was another moment when his words seemed ironic and full of hidden meaning. After the kiss, the emperor noticed that Noel was still avoiding his gaze. She replied that it was because she was embarrassed, and he was the one making her feel so awkward. Noel, aware of how her emotions influenced her behavior, noted that this was precisely why she was interested in the emperor. He had always been something mysterious and attractive to her. Noel said he truly was pure evil, that she felt his influence on herself. The emperor replied with a smile that he knew this perfectly well, but still had no intention of changing his behavior. She couldn't understand how he could speak with such confidence, and asked how he even knew the language and culture of her country. The emperor merely smiled mysteriously, leaving her with a multitude of questions. The emperor remarked that this was his secret, and no matter what she dreamed of, he could make it all come true. It was another moment when his words left a sense of ambiguity and mystery. Noel said sarcastically that he truly was the embodiment of kindness. The emperor thanked her for her words, though there was a hint of mockery in his voice. He pulled out a key, and Noel, surprised, asked what it was. She assumed it was the key to the library she'd longed to visit. She was shocked to learn that the emperor still remembered her request. He noted that he had promised to bring the key, but hadn't said he would give it to her immediately, thus leaving room for intrigue. Noel's reaction was so sweet and genuine that the emperor couldn't resist teasing her some more. However, just as he was about to continue, his heart began to tremble. He reached out to her, but couldn't contain his feelings, declaring it was his wedding gift. His words were filled with unexpected softness and warmth, which surprised her a little. The words wedding gift sounded much better than award, conveying a much deeper emotion. It made the moment a little more intimate, and Noel got the hint. Noel glanced at the key and quietly remarked that with it, she could exit and return to the library. She knew the key was important and would help her avoid trouble with security, but only if she didn't catch the guard's eye. Otherwise, her plan would fall apart. She promised Ethan that she would do everything to avoid trouble and avoid prying eyes. Ethan suggested that if she did get caught, he'd help her out. But Noel confidently assured him that wouldn't be a problem, and she'd definitely be able to avoid trouble. The emperor was interested in how confident she was in her own abilities. He paused, seeing her confidence, and it made him appreciate her determination even more. She knew exactly where she was, and she was certain that Kairos was far from what she had previously imagined. This new realization strengthened her resolve in this situation. Noel confidently replied that she knew things weren't as she imagined. She wasn't weak as he thought, and was ready to face any challenge. From her words, it was clear she was clearly not some fragile and defenseless woman. She was strong and ready to fight for her goal, despite all the difficulties. Ethan was probably already lost in her red eyes, but that didn't stop him from continuing to watch her, feeling an ever-increasing affection. That gaze was filled with deep emotion. Noel laughed and said that when he arrived tomorrow, she would tell him about her grandiose feat. She smiled, anticipating how she could surprise him with her actions. The emperor was surprised by her confidence and asked how she knew he would arrive tomorrow. The girl, slightly embarrassed, didn't immediately understand what the emperor meant by this. She turned to him and, puzzled, asked if he was planning to come tomorrow. He replied no, adding that he had said he wouldn't be there tomorrow. Noel, hearing this, nodded calmly and said she understood. She didn't repeat her questions, though. Inside, she felt a slight dissatisfaction with his answer. The emperor somewhat mockingly added that he would indeed not be at the palace tomorrow, and that he hadn't expected her to be so enviously awaiting him. It sounded humorous. Noel clarified that this wasn't true at all, that she wasn't jealous, and that her words were honest. She hadn't hidden anything, but Ethan kissed her, smiling, and told her not to worry. He said Lord Hobosha had done something wrong, and he was going there to check it out. Ethan assured her it was harmless, and everything would be cleared up soon. Noel asked if it was dangerous, to which Ethan confidently confirmed that no, everything would be fine. He was confident in his safety and wasn't worried about the consequences. Ethan reminded her that she shouldn't use that key tomorrow. Noel, a little surprised, asked him why. Her gaze was full of questions because she was ready to act. He explained that he wouldn't be able to protect her tomorrow. While he was away from the palace, she had to remain safe and not leave this place. He didn't know what might happen in his absence. He sternly warned her that she mustn't meet anyone or go anywhere. Regardless of her intentions, she must remain where she was to avoid any unexpected problems. The emperor added that he didn't know when or where she might be in danger. He was ready to protect her, But at that moment, he needed to focus on other matters. So he asked her again not to leave this place when he couldn't protect her. He said this with genuine concern, understanding how important her safety was to him. Noelle pointed out that he'd said he'd help her if she was caught. Ethan replied with a smile that it depended on the situation and that he was always willing to change his mind. The Emperor continued with a smile, insisting that this was precisely how he was fickle. Noelle, in turn, noted that he was actually blameless in his actions, and it was precisely this innocence of his that she loved. Her words were followed by a passionate kiss, which confirmed their mutual feelings and affection. Lucas noted that it looked like things weren't over today. Iran added that the problem wouldn't be resolved so quickly this time, and they would have to continue monitoring the situation. The flag one of these arrogant individuals displayed was enormous, almost defiant. It attracted attention and irritated many high-ranking officials. Hobash was the largest port city of the Kairos Empire, a vital strategic center and trade hub through which one could reach every corner of the empire. However, the Rabel family, who had recently inherited Hobash, refused to pay the military dues, which displeased the emperor. This step marked the beginning of a serious problem. Without the emperor's permission, they began building fortresses and flying their own flag, demonstrating their independence from imperial authority. This was blatant betrayal. The emperor was certain that bloody retribution would soon follow. His servants were ready to carry out his orders, and punishment would not be long in coming. The emperor said they had 10 minutes, and within that time, they must bring Rabel here. He was ready to punish the traitors and show who the true master of this empire was. He promised to force these people to discover who truly ruled the empire. Their complacency would be shattered, and they would understand who they were dealing with. The man couldn't understand who dared to do such a thing, but soon realized that the emperor himself stood before him. His eyes widened in surprise, and he realized the consequences would be grave. He respectfully declared that it was a great honor to meet His Majesty. It was a strange-sounding phrase on his lips, but it couldn't hide the fear within him. Ethan told him the consequences for treason would be the most severe death. The man tried to justify himself, saying he only wanted to make the city stronger. He tried to explain that he only wanted to improve his position and make it richer. It was sincere, but the emperor couldn't accept his excuses. The man claimed that Kobash had always been a small port, and his family took control of it. It was a natural process, he believed, but now everything had changed, and Hobash had become an important part of the empire. The Rabels, however, didn't understand that this was part of a larger picture and strategy. He couldn't understand how this could be a betrayal, since Kobash had always belonged to their family. It was land that should have been part of their heritage. The emperor interrupted his explanation and ordered him to remain silent. After that blood was spilled, and the man realized his words had no meaning at that moment, Ethan asked who really defended Hobash, who built the fortresses and granted the title. It was the result of protecting the Kairos Empire, and they paid for it. It was under the emperor's protection that they existed, and so Ethan shouted that they would pay for their betrayal. Not with money, but with their lives. It was a decisive sentence. After this scene, they decided to return to the palace since everything had been decided. The emperor no longer wanted to waste time talking to those who did not understand their guilt. The maid, looking at what was happening, told the lady that it was true. It was the first time she had seen the emperor like this, so decisive and cold in his cruelty. Noel asked Dila to stop her stories, but she continued, claiming that before leaving, he looked at her for a long time while she was sleeping and even smiled. The emperor, intervening in the conversation, gave orders that Noel not be awakened. The maid informed her mistress that such details should not concern her, and that it was better to focus on more important matters. Noel, clearly irritated, ordered everyone to stop this talk and insisted on finding a way out of the situation. She wasn't going to waste any more time on idle discussions and was determined to take action. She couldn't stay in this garden any longer. The maid remarked that this was their first meeting, and it was quite difficult for her. However, it was clear they had all been looking forward to this moment with impatience. The girl suggested that next time they should definitely bring a map to avoid such complications. This seemed like a sensible solution, especially after realizing how far they had to go. It's moments like these that Noel realizes she's not her father, Jade Nears. The knight believed her father could have arranged everything, as he was always precise and never lost in unfamiliar territory. Her father, Jade Nears, memorized every path and route which she heard was extremely useful during the war. Knowing his way around the terrain would have allowed him to avoid many dangers. When a person is familiar with the territory, it's much easier to understand where the enemy might be heading. This knowledge gave him not only a strategic advantage, but also confidence in his own strength. Sir Jade was truly an outstanding man, the pride of his people and soldiers. His achievements were a testament to his hard work, and his daughter was proud to call herself his. The lady acknowledged that they had clearly taken the wrong path, and this became apparent when they began looking for a way out. She understood that this step might not have been the best one. The lady said they were very pleased to have a new Akassis in their midst. Noel, however, felt that if she didn't leave this place now, something bigger would soon begin, and they wouldn't stop. Noel realized that if she didn't leave now, they might get too aggressive. She didn't want to be the cause of unnecessary anxiety that could ruin everything they had planned. Eris hoped Lady wasn't just going to leave. She couldn't believe it would all be over so quickly, as the meeting with Noel was too important for everyone present. Noel replied that she didn't want to disturb everyone who had come there to enjoy their time together. She believed that her presence shouldn't be a nuisance to others. Eris assured her that the meeting would be boring without her, and that her departure wouldn't improve the situation. She tried to persuade the lady to stay, promising that everyone would be much more interested with her presence. Eris wondered what they should do now, since there was only one regular chair left. She noticed that the situation was becoming tense, and they had to decide quickly who would sit. The seating system was very oddly organized, and now they had to figure out who would occupy the remaining seats. This became yet another source of discussion among those present. In fact, it all seemed rather silly. Lady Akassis had only just arrived, and it seemed she already disliked the place. This added to the tension as her expectations were not being met. Perhaps Noel felt uneasy because her status as a princess abandoned by her country raised unnecessary questions. This barbarian tribe from the north, if she really was from there, would be familiar with the area. If she truly hailed from the northern territories, it would explain her familiarity with the area. Her understanding of the world around her gave her a confidence that others sometimes lacked. Aris ordered everyone to stop discussing the matter, as the new Akassis might be upset. She also admitted that it was her mistake not to inform the guests of the exact date of the next meeting. Everyone believed it couldn't be Eris's fault, and that her own shortcomings were the cause of all the misunderstandings. She blamed herself for failing to organize everything properly. Noel realized that these children loved to play with others, and they were so interested in her that they had even gone all the way to the ceremonial level. This didn't go unnoticed, and she decided to play with them for a while. She decided to play with them a little, just enough to see how seriously they took her. This allowed her to learn what their true goals were and what interested them. Fortunately, they now knew of her existence. This was an important step, but she realized that it was too late to react. Everything that needed to be done had already been done. Although time had already passed, Noel received an invitation from Lady Akassis Aris. It was a momentous occasion that did not go unnoticed, and she prepared to accept. It seemed she hadn't forgotten about her mistress, despite all the events. The woman noted that even the chairs were positioned incorrectly, adding a certain uneasiness to the atmosphere. Noel noticed that everything was oddly arranged. Her seat was occupied, meaning it should have been empty. This puzzled her somewhat, as everything seemed unpredictable. Eris couldn't understand how they dared to get up before her. It violated all the principles, and she felt irritated. She couldn't understand how this could happen at her meeting. The ladies replied that they didn't mean to disturb the order, and immediately took their seats as soon as they heard the order. Noel didn't object, understanding that it had to be done without further ado. Noel reassured everyone, saying everything was fine, and there was no need to worry about her. She sat down in an empty chair, assuring them she had no intention of causing any difficulties for the others. She settled into the empty seat and said she'd be staying. Noel couldn't afford to worry about trivialities when the most important thing was to maintain her composure under the circumstances. Eris noticed that the lady still seemed very calm. This surprised her, as she had expected the tension to show, but Noel seemed completely collected. Iris was a little worried that there might not be enough seats, but it was a minor concern. In any case, everything would fall into place once everyone was seated. Noel said this place had been prepared by Lady Acasis Aris, and she couldn't feel uncomfortable. Everything had been arranged with her presence in mind, and she had no intention of complaining. She'd attended such meetings often, and it no longer seemed out of the ordinary. Noel was accustomed to this kind of atmosphere, and this time she felt quite calm and confident. Eris thought Noel was being too arrogant. She couldn't understand why she had such a smirk on her face, as if nothing was particularly important to her. As soon as they met, she immediately began to despise that suspicious expression. Iris believed the girl clearly didn't understand her situation and didn't know how to behave in such situations. Eris expressed displeasure, asking whether the maids had mouths in the serum near or whether they didn't feel the need to express their thoughts. It was a sarcastic remark directed at Noel. Noel immediately understood what Iris meant. It was related to her concern about her status, and Noel knew she had to be careful in her responses to avoid causing unnecessary resentment. Iris only said this out of concern for Lady Noel. She believed that Acasis was a position that amounted to a harem, and perhaps Noel should have acted differently. She asked what kind of example Noel was setting for her maids if she continued to dress like that. It was a remark about her appearance, which Iris considered unacceptable. Noel replied that they were all His Majesty's women, but not all were the same. There were laws governing rank, and everyone should know their place in that hierarchy. In any case, Miss must be an example for everyone. Iris, with smug confidence, declared that she was that very example, as befitted her position. Her opinion on who should be on the podium was unshakable. She added with obvious disdain that she should simply give Noel a new outfit. It was her suggestion, implying that the lady should look more befitting her status, lest she cause disappointment. If things were left as they were without any changes, there would be no end to the problems. She warned Noel wasn't about to reject such proposals, realizing that perhaps her intentions were good, but they were expressed in a way that was untrue. Noel said she would accept the kindness of the Acases, although in reality she had recently been given many outfits. She admitted she had already received a lot of clothes, and now she didn't know how to wear them properly, because there were so many. The maids suggested this dress to Noel, and although she wasn't sure it was the best choice, she trusted their judgment. They thought it would be appropriate for her position. Noel learned that the dress had been a gift from a certain person, and although she thought it was perfectly acceptable as she tried it on, she realized how unsuitable it was. With each passing moment, she became more and more convinced that the dress needed to be altered. She decided to let this man know how she felt and ask for changes to the design. Her thoughts were immediately met with objections. Everyone around her began arguing restlessly and trying to dissuade her from such actions, insisting they meant no harm. People began to reassure her that she shouldn't have sent the message to this person at all. They thought her worries were unfounded, and that the dress wasn't as bad as she thought. They reminded her that the materials were truly luxurious, and even if the design itself wasn't quite perfect, it shouldn't have been a problem. Noel was shocked by this approach, her confusion growing. Noel disliked such scenes, and therefore preferred not to interfere in matters involving the emperor's women. She felt uncomfortable in such situations, and did not want to create unnecessary controversy. On the contrary, she felt like she was at the center of this chaos, and realized she couldn't act as everyone expected. It was too difficult for her, and it only muddled her own judgment. She understood their concern and gratitude, but she also realized that they were far more knowledgeable about imperial etiquette than she was. This made her feel uneasy, though she decided to follow their advice. Noel added that she would need to take a few lessons from Acasis Aris, as she was still not accustomed to the strict and complex etiquette that was in effect at the emperor's court. She didn't understand what she was talking about, but she still insisted that it was true. Her words sounded a little uncertain, as she herself was at a loss about her actions. According to the etiquette of the Kairos Empire, people of lower social status are expected to lower their gaze when meeting those of higher rank. Noel decided to check if there were any exceptions to this rule. Eris confidently stated that there were no exceptions to this strict rule, and that everyone must follow the established norms regardless of each person's situation or position. Noel couldn't understand how anyone could look up to anyone higher than the highest-ranking official when they were already standing right in front of her. This puzzled her greatly, and she thought she needed to do something about it immediately. She was surprised when Aris continued to explain that this situation wasn't just about the Akasis. If they didn't follow the rules, it would be an insult to everyone below them. Aris pointed out that it was important for all subjects to show how much higher in status they were, and how important it was to follow these rules, so as not to undermine the power and authority of the emperor. Noel wondered why people around her continued to stare her straight in the face, despite all the rules, and she felt bad that her position was not respected in any way. Eris didn't know how to respond to this question because she was at a loss herself. She realized they still hadn't lowered their gazes, which could be perceived as a breach of etiquette. Noel felt the situation was getting out of control, and in a show of submission, she immediately dropped to her knees, declaring that she had made a mistake that could have cost her her life. Her words caused everyone around her to kneel, attracting even more attention. Noelle decided it might be worth introducing herself again to clarify the situation. She rose from her knees and announced that she was the new Akasis, the first princess of Tortilla Noel Rias. It was important that everyone understood her position and respected her status. Immediately after her statement, the maids began to greet her as Akasis, addressing her with respect and expressing their respect for her role in the imperial court. The emperor, who arrived unannounced, was a little taken aback, as he had no time to prepare for such a visit, but he remained calm and focused on the affairs at hand. If he found anything unacceptable, he could report it. But overall, he wanted everyone to remain calm. The emperor said there was no need to worry about trifles. The emperor added that he was leaving tomorrow anyway, and this was just a short break. Lucas walked behind, but he couldn't help but notice the tense atmosphere around him. Lucas turned to Aaron and said that he could no longer hear anything that was happening because his thoughts were completely absorbed in the palace and he had no time for conversation. The emperor heard this and replied that it was complete nonsense, as they were too noisy and prevented him from concentrating. Aaron again reminded Lucas that he should watch his words. The emperor said they were too noisy and therefore ordered them to go through their own channels, instructing them not to disturb him with unnecessary conversations or continue to distract him. The next morning, the emperor was preparing to return to the palace. He was a little exhausted by everything that had happened, but he still decided to move forward and not rest on his laurels. He wanted to know who these people were and what they could do to help him relax and get rid of his fatigue, but Khan said that was exactly what they were there for. The emperor announced that he was fed up with this and ordered everyone to leave the premises. He no longer wanted to waste time on strangers who were only creating unnecessary burdens. He felt how they created an unpleasant atmosphere around him, full of bad spirits. Although she in herself was beautiful and did not need magic to bewitch, he remembered how she had greeted him, and the memory warmed his heart. He felt her softness and tenderness penetrate his soul, making his heart beat faster. But at the same time, he realized that she was a cunning and treacherous woman, hiding many other qualities that he might yet have to discover. He felt his face suddenly turn red. Thoughts of her overwhelmed him, and his own emotions began to surge, bringing with them unexpected feelings. Ares greeted him with deep respect, saying it was a great honor to see him as the Emperor of the Sun. This was a manifestation of her affection and recognition of his authority. Eris thought that he was probably tired from the journey, and upon hearing of his arrival, she decided to meet him immediately to show her respect and concern for his well-being. She hadn't expected him to arrive so soon. It took her by surprise, and she didn't know how best to act at such a moment, given the visit's extreme abruptness. Aris knew that His Majesty was only supposed to be at the palace on designated days. The Emperor's unannounced appearance raised many questions. At that moment, Aris thought that if she could only win His Majesty's heart, her life would change, but she was determined to achieve it. She took a step forward and took his hand, asking permission to accompany him to his chambers. This was her way of showing the care and attention she wanted to give him. She had a wonderful tea that she assured him would improve his health, but the emperor declined her offer, asking her to leave. He was focused on other matters. Eris didn't quite understand what was happening or why the emperor was refusing her proposals. He said he was heading to Saramnir and had no time to rest. The emperor continued his affairs, despite the proposals of Eris, who felt that all this was just a pathetic attempt to hold him back. The maids decided to end their conversation, realizing that if they continued, Lady Eris might become deeply upset. Aris, in turn, vowed to pay for this humiliation. Lady Ares informed the knight that she had just heard that His Majesty had departed for the harem palace. This was an important event that could not go unnoticed by her. Noel noted that the emperor had already told her he would return sooner than planned. She noted that they needed to be prepared for any outcome, as anything could happen. The maid hoped the emperor wouldn't return too soon, as she was certain Lady Aris wouldn't let things go if they didn't meet him in time. This added to the tension. The lady said they would soon find out what would happen, remembering the emperor's words. She added that she must not leave this place until he could protect her. This made her feel vulnerable. The emperor always told her she mustn't leave the palace without his permission. The lady merely obeyed his orders, but she understood that this could bring great shame upon Lady Aris. Noel hoped it wouldn't be a problem, as she didn't think it was all that important, given the current situation. The main thing was to avoid attracting unnecessary attention. The maid was surprised to notice that the entire palace had literally been turned upside down by these events. They discussed only Lady Aris and her bad reputation, which only made her situation even more difficult. Rumors of Lady Aris's bad reputation only intensified, and her image likely worsened even further. All the servants in the palace spoke only of her actions and their consequences. The mistress inquired about the fuss surrounding Lady Aris. She asked the maids to tell her directly what was happening, so she could understand the situation and what to do next. One of the maids explained that Lady Aris was known for her cruelty, often slapping her servants when they were in a bad mood. It had become a habit everyone had grown accustomed to despite her status. The lady began to understand why everyone around her accepted her behavior so calmly. When Lady Aris lost her temper, she became dangerous, and no one dared stop her. When Lady Aris lost control, she would throw anything she could get her hands on. This fit of rage often destroyed everything around her, further damaging her reputation. Noelle couldn't believe what she was being told. The maid knew it was hard to accept, but it was true. Lady Aris wasn't afraid to show her rage. Lady Aris once threw a teapot at a servant who burned his thigh. This incident became a symbol of her unpredictability and cruelty, even in moments of irritation. The mistress couldn't understand why no one tried to stop Lady Aris. The maid explained that this was all happening because she was a daughter of the Mulb family, and her behavior was perceived differently. Lady Aris was the daughter of the Mulb family, which played a vital role in the founding of the empire. This gave her a special status, and no one dared criticize her or try to change her behavior. According to the ancient rules of the Kairos imperial family, all the emperor's women were of equal status, from handmaidens to the daughters of dukes. The title of Akasis was created to simplify their treatment. Due to differences in social status, the title of Akasis was introduced, allowing women of the imperial family to be treated with special respect regardless of rank. Even if women are not queens, they are treated with the respect and dignity befitting their position in the imperial family. This status grants them certain privileges. The maid explained that, as she already knew His Majesty had only 2 Akasis, one of them was Lady Aris. The other was Lady Sua of the Celtic ducal family. Noelle asked why she had never met Lady Sua. The maid explained that Sua never left her chambers, and her servants from the Celtic family knew little about what was going on. Noelle was surprised that Lady Sua was hiding in her chambers and not coming out. This created an additional air of mystery around her, and her behavior attracted attention. The maid added that there was a secret that everyone knew. Many called Lady Sua abandoned in the harem because she rarely appeared in public. It was said that Lady Sua was confined to her harem and rarely ventured outside. This fact gave rise to numerous rumors about her status, which remained a mystery to most. The Kairos imperial family was known for having many women in their lineage, but fortunately, a worthy prince was born who could correct this situation. Many of these women remained locked in the palace, their entire lives unknown to anyone. Their fates remained unknown except to their closest relatives. The situation changed when Emperor Ethan Apuleius ascended the throne. He began reforming the government, but women in the imperial family continued to have restricted access to the palace. After the end of the border war, the nobility began to actively offer their daughters to the emperor, hoping for their rise in status and an improvement in their position in the imperial family. The Mulb and Celtic families were among the most active in this process. During the war, the Celtic family's position worsened, and they sought new opportunities to improve their reputation. The Suat family, part of the Celtic family, became objects of scorn among the elite. Rumors swirled that their daughter Suat had been caught engaging in indecent acts, tarnishing her reputation. Rumors about Lady Suat, spread by the Mulb family, claimed that she could become an Akasis, but she herself suspected that these rumors were part of a plot against her. Lady Suat believed the rumors about her were spread by the Mulb family in an attempt to ruin her reputation. She suspected this was part of a plan to discredit hers. This remained only her assumption, but she understood that the emperor could not simply leave her if it were not necessary for political reasons. Noel asked why Suat thought she'd been abandoned. The maid, though she didn't know the details, explained that Suat had made a mistake on her first day with the emperor. On her first day with the emperor, Suat made a serious mistake, and from then on, the emperor never appeared in her chambers. This greatly affected her position. The girl was surprised by the emperor's behavior. The maids confirmed her surprise, explaining that the emperor had indeed acted in a way no one expected. Noel didn't know how to react to what was happening. However, the knight soon announced that the emperor himself had arrived, and everyone's attention shifted to his appearance. Noel kept wondering why the emperor had treated Suat this way. The question haunted her, and she couldn't find a rational explanation. Emperor Ethan looked at the girl and noticed that he seemed unwelcome. He sensed something was wrong and decided to investigate. Ethan noticed that Suat was clearly thinking about something more important than his presence. This made him wonder about her feelings and the reasons for her behavior. He also noted that she had a sweet scent. Noel quickly replied that this was not the case and assured him that she had been waiting for his return the whole time. The emperor admitted that he missed the sweet scent. Because of it, Noel felt her face flush slightly and said it was just her perception and that she didn't mean anything special. But that wasn't all. Noel was shocked and said she wasn't at all. Ethan calmly remarked that if she didn't like the current situation, he was willing to compromise and simply close his eyes. His words sounded casual, but their subtext was profound. After these words, they kissed again. The lady felt her heart beat faster and her cheeks flush. She tried to hide her embarrassment, but it was difficult. Fortunately, she hadn't yet forgotten how to breathe properly, despite the wave of emotion. However, her embarrassment was reflected in the emperor, who looked a little confused. Noel asked, wanting to know how well the work had been done. The emperor, after considering her words, replied that the result was probably worth a 50-50 assessment. She realized everything was taking longer than expected. Her patience was wearing thin as she'd assumed Ethan would return to her immediately after completing his duties. Ethan smiled and said he'd heard her waiting for him. Noel responded by emphasizing that without his presence, she wouldn't be able to use the key she possessed. The emperor frowned slightly and noticed that she was complaining again, but he still wondered why she did not come out to meet him as soon as he returned. Noel calmly explained that she was simply waiting for him in her chambers, as he had clearly ordered her not to leave until he returned. She complied. She added with a smile that a flower couldn't seek out a bee. Ethan, with a hint of admiration, guessed she'd already established herself as a figurehead in the harem. Noel was surprised he knew about it, considering it had all happened by accident. However, she agreed he was right. She had actually done quite well. Admitting to her active nature, Noel said that next time she would be the bee herself searching for a flower. Her words sounded decisive. She added with a slight smile that this time His Majesty would have to become a flower, and she would definitely find him wherever he was, which caused Ethan a slight embarrassment. Ethan gently replied that she didn't need to take on such responsibilities. He assured her that he could find her himself if she would just stay put. Noel frowned and admitted that she didn't like the role of a flower at all. It was against her character, but she knew she couldn't go against his will. Ethan thought such fortitude and determination were to be expected from Jadenir's daughter. Her character was unique, quite unlike that of other women in the Empire. However, she emphasized that she could not disobey his orders. Ethan smiled at her stubbornness, as her contradictions only made her more interesting. Noel couldn't resist, and declared that if that was the case, then he would be the flower. And this would be that rare case when the flower itself would look for its bee. Meanwhile, rumors began circulating in the palace about a new Akasis from Tortilla who had spent 2 days with the emperor. Many wondered who she was. These rumors reached Aris, who was furious when she heard what was happening. She couldn't understand why none of her loved ones had yet come to support her. When she finally met her brother, she couldn't contain her emotions. He, noticing her upset state, asked how she was doing, but Eris interrupted him. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she threw herself into her brother's arms, complaining that he had ignored her for too long. She couldn't understand why he visited her so rarely. She admitted she missed him terribly, and her voice was filled with pain and longing. Her brother, surprised by her tears, was at first taken aback, but then patiently began to console her. The girl accused him of being the reason she was so worried, as they hadn't seen each other in a long time. The man tried to explain that his work took up all his time. He reminded her that as Deputy Minister of Finance, he was forced to travel frequently. However, he noted that the northern Akasis probably irritated her greatly. Eris admitted she had absolutely no idea what to do with this girl. She was a stranger, and her sudden appearance in the palace made her feel vulnerable. Her brother, smiling, advised her not to worry, and instead of getting angry, tried to demonstrate her superiority. After all, Eris was the most important woman in the empire. He confidently said that if she couldn't handle it, who could? She just needed to remind everyone who she was and show her rival her place. These words inspired Eris. She was touched by her brother's support and sincerely thanked him. Despite her doubts, she regained her confidence. Her eyes filled with tears of gratitude again. Her brother, seeing this, reassured her, reminding her that her position as the future empress guaranteed her an advantage. He firmly promised to personally take care of the new Akasis. He was confident he could handle this task, as Aris had always come first for him. Eris sincerely thanked him for his support, reminding him that he was the only one she could rely on. She felt protected again. The conversation continued on a lighter note, and Eris began to recount various little things that had been happening lately. Her brother couldn't resist a little sarcasm. He found it a little funny that despite her beauty and status, Eris had failed to win the emperor's heart. However, he understood her difficult situation. He decided that, as a brother, he had to protect her. But to do that, he first needed to meet this northern Akasis himself to understand who he was dealing with. Aris, hearing this, agreed, but warned that Veritas was a place where even the most powerful and influential people could not enter. This worried her. Nevertheless, the lady remained confident in her decision. Noel smiled calmly and confirmed that she intended to get in despite all the difficulties. She tried to explain that she had already received permission for this from the emperor. However, the maid was surprised to learn that the emperor had actually allowed it. The lady clarified that the conversation with His Majesty hadn't been easy, but she'd achieved her goal. The maid, still hesitant, asked for details. Noel hesitated, then replied that she was confident of success, although she knew the chances were 50-50. She had received the key, but she knew a lot would be required of her. The maid, still hesitant, tried to explain that this wasn't enough for success. However, the mistress, looking at them, firmly said she needed their help. The maid, unable to object, realized her mistress had no choice but to rely on her help. Noel, feeling resolute, emphasized that this was her last chance for success. The girls exchanged glances, dubious about the plan, but ultimately agreed to help. The lady was confident that if she received the necessary support, she would be able to infiltrate Veritas. The lady looked confused. Unsure how exactly to help in this situation, Sierra assumed the lady already had a plan. She suggested that the lady discuss everything with them and only then make a decision, as every step was important. The lady nodded in agreement. Her voice was firm as she asked everyone to pay attention. She understood that everything depended on her actions, and she decided to explain her plan. She began by mentioning Veritas, a place accessible only to the emperor. Rumor has it that there's a secret door there that leads directly to his chambers. The lady clarified that the door could only be opened with a special key belonging to the emperor. Without it, it was impossible to enter, making her plan extremely risky. She calmly declared that she intended to use the key to return the same way. Her confidence was inspiring, despite the obvious dangers. Everyone understood the risk, but no one dared to dissuade her. The maid anxiously reminded them that Veritas was guarded and impossible to enter unnoticed. The mistress merely nodded, confirming that she was aware of this. However, the lady assured them she knew a loophole which would give them a chance. She explained that, despite the multitude of guards, there was one safe route they used. Her confidence gave everyone hope, though no one knew how difficult it would be. 2 days later, the emperor, immersed in work, was perplexed by the sheer number of documents lying before him. He felt irritated by the endless pile of paper that literally filled his desk. Lucas noticed that the number of documents had increased significantly over the past 3 days. He warned that they needed to be dealt with quickly, otherwise there would be even more, and the situation would spiral out of control. Aaron suggested taking things slow unless they required immediate action. He believed that some work could be postponed, but his comments were met with disapproval. Lucas insisted the report was extremely important, and the emperor must address it immediately. Leaving things as they were was unacceptable, as the consequences could be serious. He added that the ministers, instead of fulfilling their duties, were doing nothing but arguing. The emperor sharply rebuked Lucas, ordering him to be silent, which upset him. Aaron, observing Lucas's reaction, reminded him that he had warned him that the conversation might not end in his favor. He watched the tension between them with a slight chuckle. Aaron noticed that rumors about the new Acasis were becoming increasingly prevalent in the palace. He discussed with curiosity how recent events and the emperor's visits had only fueled the interest of those around him. After returning from Seremnir, rumors spread even more. This was unsurprising, as everyone wanted to know the details, especially when it came to the emperor's personal life. People weren't surprised or concerned, as everyone knew the emperor was currently experiencing a passionate marriage. However, some found these rumors a source of discussion. Aaron continued to playfully tease the emperor, hinting that he was drawn to the Acasis by feelings he expected the emperor to start cursing. But this only added to the hilarity of their conversation. Lucas, unperturbed, remarked that he hadn't said anything wrong. However, Aaron tried to steer the conversation in a different direction, trying to smooth things over and avoid further conflict. With a slight smile, Aaron advised the emperor to step outside for some fresh air. He confidently added that his mistress was likely waiting for him. The emperor was puzzled, but seemed intrigued. The emperor expressed surprise, assuming his mistress was busy reading. He wondered if she was truly waiting for him, as such situations made him question her actions. When Aaron asked the emperor again what he meant, he admitted he was curious to see how his mistress would get out of this again. He sensed her behavior was concealing something more. Noel reassured herself and the others, once again, that her plan was foolproof and they wouldn't be caught. Her confidence calmed those around her somewhat, though the tension remained. The maid approached Noelle and informed her that Duke Celtic had sent her a letter. This news brought a slight smile to the Acasis. Letters from the Duke always meant something to her and brought her a sense of security. Noel thanked the maid for the timely message. She knew Duke Celtic was a trusted ally, and his words could be especially valuable at this moment. The maid sheepishly asked the Acasis to stop calling her Nanny and instead address her simply by her first name. She felt uncomfortable with such formality. Noel smiled and explained that the habit of calling her Nanny had been a long time coming. It was difficult to unlearn, but she was sincerely grateful for the maid's devotion and understanding. Swa, recalling her past at the Duke's estate, noticed how her life had changed. She noticed that the maid looked exhausted, as if the hardships of recent times had left a deep mark on her. The maid spoke wistfully of how cheerful and happy Noel had been before she entered the harem. Now her eyes seemed filled with a sadness that seemed to never leave her. Suddenly, another maid appeared in the room, excitedly reporting that she had heard a lot of interesting news. Her story was full of gossip about the latest events in the palace. She enthusiastically spoke about the new Acasis, who, as it turned out, had managed to create quite a stir. It was said that even the emperor himself had visited her palace twice, which became the subject of much speculation. The maid also added that Aris had been under frequent criticism in recent days. Everyone wondered how she could have allowed this to happen, given her position and influence in the harem. However, opinions were divided. Some believed that Aris deserved her reproaches for her arrogance, while others saw this as an opportunity to punish her for her habit of looking down on others. The maid reminded him to be careful with his words. Then she expressed curiosity, asking what kind of person this new Akasis was. She was clearly interested in the mysterious figure. In response, the other girl said she didn't know her well, but she seemed to have a knack for surprising people. She seemed mysterious and attracted everyone's attention. However, their interest didn't develop into obsession. The maid decided she wouldn't think much of the new Akasis, since they had no common interests. Her own life was filled with concerns, and the affairs of others were left aside. Anxiety filled the heart of one of the maids, who feared their plan might fail. She couldn't even imagine what would happen if they were caught and begged her mistress to be careful. Noelle, for her part, couldn't understand how they could be exposed. She thought the costume Heather had designed looked perfect. It concealed her true identity and emphasized her elegance. Despite her mistress's assurance, the maid reminded her that she was not allowed to visit the imperial chambers. She was worried about Noelle, but she didn't want to say it out loud. Noelle confidently declared that from that moment on, the maid could trust her completely. Her words sounded firm and convincing, as if her mistress knew how to protect them both. The maid told Noelle that her cousin Dean Maid served in the Imperial Guard. She introduced him as a reliable and loyal man, ready to help when needed. Noelle, hearing this, coldly remarked that she had no desire to meet him in person. She mentioned that, if necessary, even soporific perfume would do, but later added that she was joking. The servant explained that she had mentioned this before, but her mistress apparently hadn't heard. She reassured her that she could be relied upon in such matters. Noelle, hearing the maid's explanation, smiled slightly. She still found it difficult to imagine that her cousin being part of the Imperial Guard could somehow help her plans. However, the maid sincerely believed her brother was a man she could trust. She hoped his participation would prove useful, even if it took some time to coordinate. Noelle, looking thoughtfully at the maid, said she believed her words, but she still advised extreme caution, as even a small oversight could lead to undesirable consequences. Dila, without losing her confidence, reiterated that everything was under control. She assured her mistress that her plan was sound and that she could rely on her experience. The maid was determined and confident of success. Her brother knew this place perfectly, every corner, every path. Now, if Noelle wanted to go somewhere, he would easily lead her there, confidently showing her the way. Noelle, noticing the tension on his face, carefully asked if he was okay. His answer was short and honest. He didn't think so at all. She tried to calm him down, reminding him that they had the keys and the debt given to them by His Majesty, with that they would definitely be able to pass, since a key opens any door. He just sighed heavily and noted that he would simply have to say that it wasn't him who opened the door if questions suddenly arose. Noelle was stunned when she found herself in the library. The tall shelves glittering with ancient secrets left her transfixed in awe. She now saw the place where the true treasures of the Empire were kept, all the historical records covering the past, present, and even the future. The history of the Empire recorded since ancient times, from the first day of its founding to the reign of the current emperor. She couldn't believe her eyes. But her disappointment grew when it turned out that her goal wasn't here. She realized she didn't know where else to look. Noelle's gaze suddenly fell upon the entries about Tortilla. This was her home country. But why was it so dirty? She supposed it was a place people visited after all. Inspired by her resolve, she recalled the deal she had made with the Emperor. Her thoughts returned once again to that fateful agreement. The Emperor, a descendant of the sun, God promised to restore Kairos to its former glory. His words echoed confidence in a future golden age. But Noelle knew the marriage's true purpose was far from a peaceful agreement. The union served as a cover for devious plans. The Emperor always desired one thing: the fall of Tortilla. His intentions were obvious to those who could read between the lines. Noelle understood that conquering the northern territories had been Kairos's long-held dream. It had been in his interests since time immemorial. Historical records confirmed that the feud between Kairos and Tortilla had lasted for centuries, its roots deep in the past. The only one who could temporarily stop this conflict was her father, Jade Nears. His name was written in golden letters in history. However, Jade's death presented an opportunity for Kairos. The Emperor Noel, suspected, intended to seize this opportunity. She didn't come here without a reason. Her goal was revenge for her father. She couldn't forget his words and the ease with which he agreed to their deal. Even his actions, his deeds, including that night in her chambers, were imbued with his inconstancy. She no longer trusted him. Noel didn't expect anything special from him. She knew his promises were empty, and she tried not to harbor false hopes. She firmly reminded herself that she would not be his woman. She had spoken these words herself, and now they sounded in her head like a mantra. Suddenly, her thoughts were interrupted by footsteps. It was Aaron and Lucas walking toward her. Lucas noticed that the place seemed imbued with magic. The man wondered why previous generations had written so many books. Aaron joked that if he continued complaining, magic would simply disappear. It was a special place closed to outsiders. Lucas was indignant when he was called a mere passerby, reminded that he was an imperial general. Eusennial tried to hide, but suddenly felt someone's hand touch her face. Her heart sank, but she tried to identify who it was. Her thoughts raced until she realized it must have been the Emperor. His voice confirmed her suspicions. He said he hadn't expected her arrival. His gaze softened as he called her fearless. There was admiration in his words, but it seemed he was hiding something more. He remarked that her appearance today was particularly impressive. He was clearly enjoying the moment, smiling his enigmatic smile. Noel felt her earlier resolve begin to weaken. She was surprised that he called her by her first name for the first time, and it touched her. The Emperor, looking straight into her eyes, asked her not to avoid him. His voice was confident. He would not let her escape. His words seemed tempting to her, but she struggled with herself. Everything became more complicated when he kissed her tenderly, upsetting her inner balance. She recalled how they'd almost been caught and shared it, but Ethan brushed it off, insisting that almost wasn't anything to be afraid of. The Emperor calmly assured them that even if someone approached, Lucas would quickly deal with the situation, as always reliably guarding them. Noel assumed the gentleman had given orders specifically not to disturb them. He confirmed with a slight grin that this was indeed the case. He looked at her curiously, noting that she was keeping her distance. He jokingly remarked that he wasn't going to eat her, trying to put her at ease. She didn't immediately get his joke. Then he asked her to come closer, assuring her that nothing bad would happen if she sat next to him. The Emperor spread his cloak on the floor, inviting her to sit. Her confusion made him wonder, why was this so difficult for her? Noelle finally made up her mind and sat down on the offered cloak. It felt strange, but she felt the Emperor was trying to make her feel comfortable. She felt uneasy with the distance between them and asked him to move closer. It felt strange to be sitting alone with him so far away. The Emperor reminded her that it was she who had tried to keep her distance from him. His voice was slightly mocking, but not without a hint of seriousness. Surprised by her reaction, he added that she herself had previously told him not to eat her, and now it seemed to have turned into a joke. Then he gently pulled her into a hug and asked her why she wanted to go to this place so much. His words sounded sincere and almost caring. She explained that there were 2 reasons. She was drawn by curiosity because this place hid a lot of truth about the world, and she loved studying such documents. But what interested her most was the possibility of finding records that would help her learn more about her own homeland and her family. The Emperor assumed she was looking for secret documents about Kairos, but she corrected him with a smile. She was interested in records about their empire. He was puzzled by why the Princess of Tortilla was seeking information about her country in Kairos. Her behavior struck him as mysterious. Noel explained that she could not find these records on her person, as they concerned her father, General Jade Nears, about whom she had been told almost nothing. She added that her uncle, the current Emperor of Tortilla, always hated her father and tried to erase his name from history. After all, an illegitimate child like her father could never lay claim to the throne. This rule had existed since the time of the first Emperor Tortilla. Despite this, Jade was the acknowledged heir, but his remarkable successes aroused the envy and fear of George Nears, who always sought to control him. Jade possessed immense strength and was invincible in battle. Every time he entered the battlefield, he brought victory and glory to his country. He was hailed as a hero who saved the empire in its hour of need. The people extolled his name and thanked him for the peace and tranquility he brought. People nicknamed him the God of War. They believed he would forever preserve peace and prosperity in their empire. Jade considered himself lucky. Despite the tough battles, he always emerged victorious. He felt like fate was on his side, but his brother George saw him as a threat. He grew up in Jade's shadow, and perhaps also dreamed of becoming emperor, though he carefully concealed it. George pretended to be indifferent in public, but envy was brewing in his heart. This became a warning to Jade of impending danger. If George had wanted, he could have destroyed Jade since he was only half royal. This hidden prejudice always haunted him. When George realized his envy of his brother was becoming a real threat, he began to tread cautiously. Soon Jade, tired of the pressure, decided to leave the capital. Jade believed life on the border would be safer for his family. He was confident he could protect them from any threats far from the palace intrigues. At the border, his life improved. His family began to adapt, and his daughter began to delight him with her successes. It seemed the hardships were behind him, but their peaceful life was shattered when their location was revealed, providing the perfect opportunity for their enemies to eliminate Jade. One fateful day, he was poisoned. The poison was slipped into the wine he was drinking. The murder was vilely planned, and Jade had no chance of escape. His death was the final part of George's plan, driven by his low self-esteem and a desire to eliminate his talented brother. Noelle felt she had to know the truth about who her father had encountered at the border. She longed to understand the nature of this struggle. She wanted to know just how great her father had been, and conversely, how low those who stood against him could fall. This knowledge became her goal. No one in Tortilla dared tell her about it. The truth about her father and his life was shrouded in silence. The emperor listened to her story and became thoughtful. He couldn't imagine the situation being so complex. Noel was determined. Their conversation was marked by an unexpected intimacy. They embraced, though both knew these moments were only temporary comfort. Noel couldn't understand why every gesture he made her misinterpret his feelings. It all confused her. However, she decided not to give in to emotion. Her primary goal remained the destruction of Tortilla, the homeland that had betrayed her father. At this point, Lucas was lost in his thoughts. Aaron, noticing this, asked what this latest nonsense was occupying his mind. Lucas, with a slight chuckle, replied that he was simply puzzled by His Majesty's gaze. His interest in it was more out of curiosity than anything serious. Aaron didn't understand what Lucas was talking about. He shrugged and simply said that it was probably too complicated. Soon, the meeting of all participants turned out to be unexpectedly quick. Aaron, looking around, advised Lucas not to delay further matters. Lucas muttered in displeasure that he had his own reasons for delaying. Aaron merely waved his hand, demanding that they speed up. Time truly flew by. Equipment issues were resolved, and soon everyone was ready for the next stage. Lucas decided to change the subject and asked if Aaron had calmed down. They then moved on to discussing the situation on the northern border. Lucas assured them their expectations would be confirmed. Ivan himself was at the border, and with his help, the situation remained under control. At this point, the emperor received a message. A new letter had been delivered to him. This was already the third message in a short period of time. The emperor, having read it, noted that Blin was warning against haste no matter what was happening. However, he didn't find this convincing. The emperor knew that if he disobeyed the order, it would be considered treason, and he would immediately face the death sentence. But one thing gave him confidence. His younger brother was still on his side. The emperor hoped that this time would be no exception. However, he firmly declared that he intended to act. Even if it was safer to stay here, he was ready to set out. This announcement shocked those around him. One of them thought that if he had known in advance how joyful the meeting would be, he would not have wasted his time. Until now, if only he knew that meeting her was so easy. Her world seems so close to him, and at the same time so far away. This is an appeal to Noel. Aaron reflected that Tortilla was currently extremely weak. back when Jade Nears was the country's protector, the situation was completely different, and their army was significantly stronger. Lucas agreed with this statement and asked what they were going to do in this situation. He couldn't figure out what steps needed to be taken to change the situation. After Jade Near's death, Tortilla lost a third of its former territory, and the morale of its soldiers weakened significantly. The situation became critical, and they now found themselves on the brink of collapse. This opened a unique opportunity for their empire. At that moment, the emperor himself entered the room, ready to discuss further steps to expand Kairos's power. Jade Nears was once the protector of Tortilla, guarding its lands, including the vast and unexplored territories to the north. However, now that he is dead, all defenses have collapsed. Tortilla was gradually disintegrating, and it appeared it would soon become a barren wasteland where a mighty nation had once stood. The Kairos Empire could now take advantage of this. This was a great chance for Kairos to seize the northern lands, which were now in a vulnerable position, and which might soon find themselves defenseless against the empire. Noel noted that they were probably talking about the territory in the central city. Tavaros, although located to the north, was much further from Tortilla, which created additional complications. The emperor replied that it didn't matter. Now Noel reminded him that there was more to the north than Tortilla, and their country wasn't the only one that could pose a threat to Kairos. Tavaros is also an old and powerful country that has maintained its independence for many years. If war breaks out, they will certainly not stand aside and may intervene. Ethan inquired about Tavaros and how it could pose a threat to the empire. He was unsure of the potential consequences of a clash with it. Tortilla and Tavaros were once sister kingdoms, and their kings were even brothers. However, time changed the relationship between the countries, and they often fought for control of the northern lands. Over time, each of the two kingdoms began to strive for dominance in the north, which inevitably led to conflict. They fought frequently, each unwilling to give in. The emperor believed that Tortilla had been the winner in these conflicts for the last 100 years. But now that it had been weakened, the situation could change, and everything would depend on further actions. Ethan was surprised by the emperor's words and asked what he meant by Tortilla's victories over the last 100 years. This moment took him by surprise and demanded clarification. Noel confirmed that, like Tortilla, Tavaros had also experienced many ups and downs, and each of these events could have affected its future development and relationships with other countries. The most significant event in the history of Tavaros was the accession to the throne of a new king who began to expand the territory of his country by force, which strengthened its position. This new king of Tavaros used his power to expand the borders of his country, and this ensured Tavaros's status as a country that had never been invaded in its long history. Ethan was amazed that Tavaros had managed to maintain its independence and avoid being attacked. A large mountain range stretching from Tartani to Nasibe surrounds the country. Ethan noted that Tavaros shares several similarities with Tortilla, which could also play a role in the event of a conflict between these states. He saw numerous parallels. Noel agreed with his remark and added that if the emperor wanted to capture Tavaros, he would have to pass through the Nasibe Mountains, and it was important to ensure the survival of the soldiers on this difficult journey. One plan is to build bases in countries surrounding Tavaros, giving soldiers the opportunity to prepare for a possible invasion of Tavaros. But this plan doesn't seem fair. Such a plan, though possible, would not give them a fair victory. The emperor knew he would not be considered great if he acted in such a way, as it was too cunning and despicable. It would have been equally possible to capture Tortilla, but to do so, it would have been necessary to overcome two main obstacles: the Tartani Mountains and Tortilla itself, which posed problems for any invader. Crossing the Tartan is a serious problem, as the mountainous terrain significantly reduces the combat effectiveness of soldiers, and this must be taken into account when planning military operations in this region. Once the troops cross the mountains, the red walls of Tortilla will open up before them, and this will be a serious blow to the morale of the soldiers because they will see powerful enemy defenses. Ethan agreed that these points were logical and would be wise to take them into account when planning the seizure of territory. Noel noted that if the emperor used a different plan, then there would be no one left in the north who could resist his conquests, and he would be able to confidently capture these lands. The emperor finally decided to learn the nature of this new plan Noel had proposed. He was interested in the details and wanted to hear specifics that would help him make his decisions. If the emperor crosses the mountains into Tartania, his first enemy will be Tortilla, and in that case, he will need to prepare for serious resistance from Tortilla's defenders. Noel's proposed plan was to first capture the less powerful countries located near Tortilla. This would allow Kairos to strengthen his position before a possible attack on Tortilla. The Kairos Empire is known for its strength, and if they can get through these countries and maintain their strength, they could likely defeat Tortilla without significant losses in troops and resources. The emperor thought about this proposal, realizing that if he followed this plan, his dream, the long-awaited conquest of the North, could become a reality. Noel was surprised that her plan had such a strong impact on the emperor, and could not believe that her ideas would actually help in achieving his goals. Ethan asked her not to be modest and admit that her help had indeed made a significant impact. He was confident her plan would succeed, and it could change the course of the entire campaign. Ethan decided it was time to stop talking about this and suggested Noel take a break. At that moment, 3 men appeared from around the corner. The men exchanged glances, and one of them remarked that Aaron must acknowledge the importance of the proposed plan. Lucas, somewhat shocked, added that he hadn't expected such proposals from Noel. Everything that was happening seemed unexpected and difficult to comprehend given the current situation. The emperor, noticing their reaction, told Lucas to simply observe what was happening. He knew these discussions were important, but he didn't want anyone interfering with the decision he was about to make. He noted that Noel truly knew the North, its history, and its peculiarities better than anyone else. Her knowledge proved invaluable in developing further strategy. Lucas couldn't help but agree with that statement, especially given her deep knowledge of Tartan and other countries they had forgotten to mention, such as Tavaros, which they would also have to face. Lucas wondered why their aides had remained silent until now. As he was sure they must have been surprised, he'd expected a more vocal and obvious reaction. Aaron explained that this matter couldn't be rushed. Noel knew the North from the inside, and therefore she undoubtedly knew more than they did, giving her a unique advantage in this matter. However, he also noted that the plan, although well thought out, was still dangerous. There was a risk that things might not go according to plan, and they would have to face unpredictable consequences. Lucas told Aaron to watch his words, as he might think Lady was a spy. Noel was a loyal ally, and such suspicions could be dangerous for their relationship. Lucas noted that this was simply his opinion, and Acasis was His Majesty's woman. Aaron didn't quite understand what was going on, and decided to ask if anyone could guarantee that the woman standing next to the emperor wasn't a spy. He wasn't sure of her intentions. He emphasized the importance of caution, reminding people not to be overly trusting in such situations. It's important to pay close attention to every step to avoid unexpected consequences. Lucas didn't think the situation was related to espionage, but the third man agreed with Aranim, believing it was impossible to be too sure every detail had to be considered. Nevertheless, they all acknowledged that the emperor had chosen this woman himself, and that was an important point. They had a duty to support his decision regardless of their doubts. They followed the emperor's decisions with complete confidence. His Majesty's decisions were always correct, and everyone was obliged to believe in them despite their inner doubts. Aaron was still worried and said that, although the emperor's decision seemed right, they still had to be careful because not everything was always as simple as it seemed at first glance. His Majesty's behavior struck him as unusual, and Aaron continued to feel wary. Something about what was happening was wrong, and he couldn't stop thinking about it. Noel wiped the paper with a pen, crossing out what she'd just heard, and said it was all wrong. Everything that was happening wasn't what she'd initially thought. She told the emperor to get rid of all the lies that were swirling around him. It was all a lie, and she needed to put an end to all this manipulation and misunderstanding. She mentioned that the Kinko lived in the western part of Tartani and the Bethguks here, but that wasn't entirely true either. All of these statements were incorrect, and she felt something wasn't adding up. The emperor ended the conversation, declaring that enough was enough for today, but Noel didn't understand why it ended there. She continued to ponder the hidden meanings behind his words. Ethan knew she wanted to help and told her she needed to focus. He remembered her words about being ready to support him in taking the north. But she shouldn't be so careless now. Noel felt a little confused. She'd forgotten something important over the past few days, and now she was at a loss. She couldn't figure out what exactly she'd missed about everything going on around her. He said it was actually kind of sweet if she didn't remember, but Noelle couldn't understand what he meant. She continued to reflect on her actions and what she might have forgotten. Noel tried to stop the Emperor, saying she simply wanted to be his servant, not his woman. She had no other intentions, and that was what mattered most to her. Ethan knew this, and so he tried to maintain a serious and reserved demeanor. He didn't allow himself to show too much emotion, recognizing the importance of their relationship and their role in the political game. So it was decided that the Molb family would take on the responsibility of building a canal in the Naik region. This was a major undertaking, and its completion would require considerable effort. The head of the Molb family, Pierre Molb, spearheaded this project. Although their family's investment was relatively small, it represented a significant contribution to the national cause. Aris offered her assistance in this project, stating that they could do whatever was needed. The emperor promised to never forget their dedication and assistance in such an important endeavor. This offer from the Molb family was impossible to refuse. Building a canal in the Naik region required significant resources, and only such a family could handle the task. The only family capable of supporting a national project of such magnitude could be the Molb family. They had acquired a status capable of significantly influencing the political situation in the empire. But this decision wasn't so simple. By receiving such a project, the Molb family could significantly increase its influence, which would displease many, including the emperor. The Molb family had ambitions. If they gained control of the national project, they would try to find a way to seize power in Karos. And ultimately, Aris could become queen. The emperor understood he had to be stopped, and he was confident he could find a way to prevent the Molb family from expanding its influence. This was a crucial part of his strategic plan. Ethan was very surprised when he met Noel. His gaze was filled with curiosity, as she seemed to him an enigmatic and unexpected figure in these political games. Ethan asked her how she, as an Akasis, could greet the emperor. He was curious about her behavior and expected some sign of respect or affection from her. Noel thought he'd just pass by, but suddenly he called out to her, and now she had to answer. It was unexpected, and she felt a little embarrassed. Noel had no intention of eavesdropping on their conversations, but she began to realize they were discussing a national project. This wasn't a casual discussion, and her curiosity grew. Akasis Aris also took part in the conversation, and if this was indeed the case, then Noel began to understand that the emperor was trying to achieve something more than it seemed at first glance. He did it on purpose. He wanted them to see her and understand her importance. Noel felt like her role in this conversation was just beginning. Noel was glad to see him, but she couldn't figure out what to do next. The emperor asked where she was headed, and she decided to be frank. Noel informed him that she was returning to her chambers. Since they were already expecting him, she decided to go straight there. She saw no point in delaying. Ethan turned to her, noting that this meeting was destined. He suggested that they at least greet each other, as it would be polite and proper. The girl understood his words, but still didn't know what to do next. She felt unsure standing before him, unsure of what to do next. Noel turned to the man standing next to Akasis Aris, believing it to be Duke Molb. She wanted to know more about him to understand how best to handle this situation. Afterwards, the girl introduced herself and said she was the first princess of Tortilla. She greeted him politely, recognizing the importance of this meeting for their future relationship. She was pleased to meet him. However, deep down, she knew this was the emperor's order. He wanted her to deal with Pierre Molb, and she couldn't ignore it. Noel also wanted him to bow his head before her, acknowledging his lowly position. This was important to her to emphasize her respect for the emperor. This wasn't easy for Noel. She wanted Pierre Molb to bow to her in the emperor's presence. She was determined to force him to acknowledge his place in this political game. She was convinced this was necessary to maintain her own respect and status. This action was intended not only to affirm her in the eyes of the emperor, but also to demonstrate her resolve to everyone. Noel understood that this was a test for Pierre Molb, and she wanted to see how he would handle it. His reaction was crucial to her understanding of his true intentions and characters. The Duke was furious at the woman's arrival. Her presence disrupted his plans and called into question his influence. However, he perceived it as a test of His Majesty's strength and will. His Majesty remained focused. The Duke understood that the Emperor was not prone to losing his temper, and the time for decisive action had not yet come. Maintaining an outward calm, the Duke kissed Noelle's hand. He coolly said he was pleased to meet her, though his irritation still simmered within. Noel smiled and remarked that they would see each other more often in the future. She spoke confidently, as if she had known how things would turn out in advance. She turned to His Highness, reminding him that it was time for him to go. However, he calmly informed her that he had no intention of accompanying them, causing her confusion. His Highness explained he had an important mission to fulfill in Suramnir. After bidding them farewell, he wished them luck, leaving them alone with their thoughts. The Emperor also bid farewell to the Duke, emphasizing that their paths were now parting. His words sounded like the end of an important chapter and the beginning of a new one. When Noel and the Duke were alone, she decided to ask the question that had been tormenting her for a long time. How long was he going to pursue her? Because it seemed he had already gotten what he wanted. His Majesty unexpectedly agreed with her words, admitting that his actions might have been overly cruel. This frankness slightly surprised her. Noel replied that she wanted to leave, but she always found herself caught in the middle of things. Her fate seemed tied to these intrigues. The Emperor looked at her carefully, conveying a message. He didn't want her to take his actions the wrong way. This was his way of protecting her. The Empress, upon learning of his words, thought the Emperor simply wanted to spite the Duke. She viewed this act as just another game in their eternal struggle. The Emperor, noticing her reaction, calmly confirmed her suspicions. But then, unexpectedly, he pulled Noel closer, as if demonstrating his authority. He reminded her that despite the customs of Kairos, her origins still mattered. She was a princess, and that must not be forgotten. The Emperor knew she understood the Duke's influence. However, he noted that the harem was expanding daily, and with it, so were the intrigues. Noel remained proud and confident. Any other woman would have bowed her head before His Majesty long ago, but she held herself with a dignity that attracted him. This was exactly the kind of empress he needed. Deep down he wondered, could Noel really take this place? He asked her point blank. Did she want power privilege and everything that came with her position? The question sounded more like a test. Noel firmly replied that she wasn't interested. Then the Emperor clarified, would she really care if someone else became his partner? To this, Noel replied that she only cared about one thing, that Akasis Aris not become that partner. Her voice was firm and uncompromising. The Emperor agreed with her position. Aris was truly unsuitable for the role, but he continued to insist, asking if she would like to be by his side. He described the life she could have, the position of Empress power, comfort, and shared rule. Didn't she want that? Noel regretfully stated that her answer remained the same. Her principles and aspirations prevented her from accepting such conditions. The Emperor realized there was no point in arguing. He said he would leave her first and departed, maintaining an outward calm, but his irritation was noticeable. Noel realized her answer had hurt him. She could see how it had wounded his pride, but she knew honesty was the only right course of action. The Duke, observing this scene, was indignant. How could this woman in such a position dare to behave so arrogantly? He reproached his daughter for inaction. In his opinion, the concubines should have been suppressed immediately, not allowed to overstep their bounds. Eris tried to argue with her father, reminding him that reckless actions could lead to disaster. However, the Duke remained adamant. The Duke's son assured them there was nothing to worry about. Noel's Akasis had no support, and ultimately, Aris would become Empress as planned. The Duke sternly warned his son not to act recklessly, for the Emperor must remain unharmed. He demanded prudence from him. The son promised to heed his father's instructions. Meanwhile, Eris met Cain and was surprised that he had appeared at such an unusual time. Cain apologized with a smile for his sudden appearance. He explained that he had been helping his father and had been delayed, but was glad to have run into her by chance. His words sounded as if he was genuinely pleased to see her. However, Eris felt irritated. She was in no mood to listen to his compliments. Her cold response left everyone wondering how their relationship would play out. No one knew where it would lead, but the tension grew. Eris replied that their meeting was just a coincidence. She made it clear that there was no point in looking for anything more in this than what was actually there. At the same time, many recalled that she was expelled from her barbarian kingdom. The emperor was kind to her, but changing her fate was not easy. Fate is cruel. Those born to fly always fly, and those who crawl will remain on the ground. Eris learned this lesson from childhood. Cain reminded her that she must remember her place. He made it clear that crossing boundaries could lead to dire consequences. Noel coldly pushed him away, telling him that he didn't know his place. She reminded him that she was an Acaces, and he was only the son of a peasant woman. Her voice was firm as she added that His Majesty was not known for his patience. She warned, "Those who forget their place often pay for it with their lives." Cain was furious. He couldn't understand how she dared speak like that to him, the heir to one of the most influential families in the country. His anger was so strong that he raised his hand to Noel, intending to teach her a lesson for such insolent behavior and her contempt for him. But at the last moment, someone stopped him. The man's gaze was stern as he asked how Cain dared touch His Majesty's Acasis. Cain turned and saw a man in military uniform. Cain winced when he heard the man call him an idiot. Only when he turned did he realize who it was. General Lucas Severus stood before him, and the serious expression on his face boded ill. The general immediately ordered Cain to retreat, warning that failure to do so would result in dire consequences. Cain felt angry, his pride wounded by such abruptness. Clenching his fists, Cain gave Lucas a hurt look and promised that this encounter wouldn't be a thing of the past. "We'll see each other again," he said, walking away still mulling over his hurt. Noel watched the scene unfold, certain it was General Lucas himself. She felt grateful for his intervention, knowing he had averted any potential trouble. Lucas, hearing the words of gratitude, merely shrugged. He noted that he was doing his duty and deserved no thanks. However, he added that he knew Cain's reputation as a man who didn't watch his actions. The general noted that if Noel encountered such behavior again, she should report it to him. "I can teach that boy a lesson," he added firmly. Lucas made a dismissive comment, saying that Cain didn't look like an emperor at all, but rather like a dog trying to bark but unable to do anything. Suddenly, Lucas remembered he hadn't introduced himself. He stated his name, Lucas Sever, and added that it was a great honor to meet Lady Acasis. His voice was reserved but respectful. Noel returned his gesture, introducing herself in return. She emphasized her pleasure at meeting such a distinguished man as an imperial general. Her words rang true. The general smiled, confirming that they would likely see each other more often. He added that he serves as His Majesty's blade, which is always close by and always in demand. Noel was surprised by this expression. She remembered asking the emperor about Lucas earlier. He had described the general as a loyal servant, a blade that would never betray its owner. The emperor said that Lucas was a man who could be completely trusted. That's why such an important position was given to him. His loyalty and devotion were beyond doubt. Noel mused that if her father had had a subordinate like Lucas, things might have turned out differently. Her family had never had such reliable people. She understood that the emperor was counting on the general, and she asked Lucas to do everything possible to continue protecting His Majesty. Her voice was filled with respect. Lucas, hearing Noel's words, decided to respond with equal sincerity. He vowed to be faithful to her as well. Nevertheless, the emperor began to wonder about her intentions. He became curious about why she was behaving so strangely and what exactly motivated her to do so. He was troubled by her categoricalness. She herself had said she didn't want to be his woman, and this confused him. Perhaps he had jumped to conclusions too quickly. Ethan previously considered Noel a person who did not know how to behave in society. As a princess of another country, she dared to enter the imperial palace, and yet remained unwavering. However, despite her coldness, he increasingly recalled her red eyes, which captivated him. The longer he watched her, the more she became desirable to him. He realized that her distance was causing him to lose control. Her words about refusing to be with him only fueled his desire to get to know her better. Noel, for her part, was brooding over the emperor, considering him a fool. A week had already passed, and he hadn't even tried to find her, despite leaving such grandiose words. During this time, she realized that leaving the imperial palace without the emperor's permission was impossible. If Ethan didn't come for her, she would remain locked here. The emperor's words that he would find her himself seemed like an empty cliché to her. Noel understood that life in the palace required patience and a certain amount of effort from her. She reflected on her dream of becoming empress. Although the path to this goal was not easy, she was ready to overcome all the challenges. To achieve her goal, Noelle knew she had to tread carefully. First of all, she decided that she had to find out more about the emperor's feelings for her. Her thoughts were interrupted by an encounter with an unfamiliar woman. The maid informed her that it was Lady Sua, who looked quite elegant. Noelle noted that she had been looking for her, but hadn't expected to meet her so casually. She introduced herself, and Lady Sua reciprocated. Noelle suggested they have tea together. She noticed that Sua's chambers were nearby, and suggested they visit to enjoy a cup of tea and conversation. Sua was a little surprised by the offer, but she agreed. She explained that she had recently received a special tea that might surprise them. As they began to talk, Noel remarked that the tea had a delicate aroma. Sua added with a smile that this is a family recipe that has been kept in their family for many years. As the conversation continued, Sua revealed that she had brought with her several favorite items from her home to make her feel comfortable in her new palace surroundings. Noel listened to her with interest, sharing her impressions of the palace. She noticed that the atmosphere here was completely different, but she liked the freshness of the air and the light breeze. During the conversation, the girls noticed the bonsai in Sua's chambers. Noel noted that all the trees here look especially picturesque, despite the lack of flowers. Sua explained that she prefers non-flowering plants to avoid attracting bees. This simple solution helped maintain the tranquility of her chambers. Noelle agreed with a smile that flowers do attract bees. She remembered her recent joke about being a bee looking for a flower. Sua added that her life was like that of a flower, which made Noel think about the words she had previously spoken to the emperor. The emperor turned to his butler and said the room was too empty. He waited for an answer, but when he received none, he turned to his servant again with a persistent remark. The emperor felt very tired and, deciding to rest a little, decided to close his eyes. But a moment later, he suddenly opened them as if something had frightened or alarmed him. Suddenly, grabbing the knife, he made a sharp movement and threw it, not expecting to see anyone nearby. His actions were quick and decisive, as if he sensed something. The gentleman, seeing what was happening, asked who it was, and then realized that in front of him stood the Akasis, who said with a smile that it was a surprise for him. The emperor was truly surprised to see her. She, humbly remarking, said that she had nearly died trying to overcome all the obstacles to get here. The emperor couldn't understand how she had ended up in his room. She replied that she had come in search of a flower, which, as strange as that might sound, was connected to an important quest for her. The emperor laughed, realizing that he truly had a wonderful flower in front of him, and jokingly said that he could not help but appreciate her incredible personality and unusual beauty. She truly was beautiful. Afterwards, they both decided to go for a walk, enjoying the moment that gave them rest and a little freedom from their responsibilities. The emperor inquired how she had ended up in his office, not expecting such a strange and unpredictable visit, which added even more intrigue to their conversation. The lady showed him the key and said with a smile that it was all thanks to him. The emperor was surprised, but even then, he couldn't help but appreciate her resourcefulness. He admitted that he had indeed helped her, assuming she had come through the library. Noel confirmed this, saying that the butler himself had shown her the way. Now the emperor understood everything. Jeremy wanted to give him some rest. He noted that she was not only a remarkable flower, but also courageous despite her circumstances. He asked her to sit on his lap, which made the girl feel embarrassed. The emperor, noticing her confusion, asked her to wait a bit before doing so. He just wanted to sit in silence for a while, because he had missed her presence for so long, and couldn't resist enjoying her scent. The girl, feeling awkward, decided to apologize for ruining his mood with her appearance, although she didn't think that everything would turn out this way. Despite her apologies, her words did not change what had been decided during the week, and she accepted the conclusions they had both reached. His gaze, like red eyes, will not waver or give in to anything, even if he gave all his gold to make her look at him. Noel wanted to say something, but they just kissed, as if nothing else existed in this world, except their meetings and this moment. The emperor pulled away and said that everything was fine, and the kisses became even better, much deeper than before, as if time had stopped. The girl remarked that this was made possible by her incredibly skilled mentor. The emperor, in turn, said this made him jealous. She said that he was so extraordinary that she couldn't keep up with him, and now she had to make every effort to live up to her mentor's expectations. She added that there was only one way out. She needed time to find her way and come to it, no matter how difficult it may sound. The emperor couldn't understand how she could obtain permission after meeting Akasis Sua by chance. She explained that Sua was of Celtic descent, and the empire treated her with respect. Akasis Sua was the only daughter of her family who was rumored to be a woman until she became an Akasis and took charge of Molby. However, when the emperor came to spend the night with her, she did something she shouldn't have. This event left a mark on their relationship, influencing their future encounters. Since then, the emperor no longer visited her, but he was confident that if Noel tried, she had every chance of a successful future, even without connections and patrons. The lady believed she shouldn't stop seeing Swa, despite everything that had happened. It would be a wise decision, as an alliance with her could open up many opportunities. The emperor, hearing her proposal, asked what would happen if he said no. Noel replied that it would upset her, but she couldn't change anything if it was His Majesty's order. He said she could do whatever she wanted. Noel, after a moment's thought, said she found Lady beautiful, and if she had to choose, she'd choose Sua over Eris. Eris, though luxurious in appearance, seemed too refined and powerful, while Sua was far more innocent. The emperor couldn't believe she was praising another woman in his presence. The emperor said he was leaving his opinion to her. Noel felt very embarrassed, unsure how to react to his words, and tried to look away. She noted that she had asked him not to make such statements in public because she felt awkward. She said they needed to cover up for a while to avoid unnecessary conversations. The emperor replied that there was no need to cover it up, since he knew that it still embarrassed her greatly, and nothing could be done about it. Noel enjoyed her time with Sua. She learned a lot about life in Kairos, including stories about the upcoming hunting competitions that were to take place soon. The hunting competition was a major event, and rumors said it would begin soon. Everyone was talking about it, and Noelle listened with interest to the details of the event. Previously, she often rode a horse to greet guests, as was her tradition. She knew how to handle horses, and was always delighted to receive such a meeting. The gentleman invited her to the competition together, not thinking it would be difficult for her. He wanted to support her, but she refused, thinking he might not like it. Noel replied that she thought he wouldn't like her participation, and that it was enough for her to get back on a horse after such a long break. She said her homeland is known for horseback riding. People there tame and ride wild horses, which was part of her cultural tradition and skills. The emperor said he knew all about it. She even said her first horse was small and sweet, just like Noel herself. This horse grew up with her. Its name was Momo. Noel surprised him by telling him that she had chosen the horse herself at the horse market where she had gone with her father to choose a suitable horse for her first riding lessons. The emperor was surprised that the horse was a gift from her father, but unfortunately, her uncle killed the horse, which upset her greatly as it was so important to her. The emperor told her to get up because they needed to go somewhere. The girl had no idea where they were going or what had prompted his sudden interest. The master said that as soon as they arrived, she would understand everything. They went to the stables, where the emperor said she could choose a horse for herself, and it would be a gift from him. The girl was completely delighted and began examining the horses, trying to choose the one that would suit her best. The emperor remarked that he couldn't lie when choosing the best gift. When she approached one horse, it immediately leaped several times. The emperor became frightened and shouted at her to be careful with the horse, as it could be dangerous. However, the horse immediately calmed down when Noelle approached. It calmly accepted her presence, and the situation calmed down. Noelle was confident in her abilities and unafraid. Noel said the horse was incredibly beautiful and would undoubtedly become famous. She was certain this horse could become her faithful companion in the future. The girl said she chose this particular horse. The emperor was stunned by her decision, as no one had ever been able to tame this horse before. The horse, which no human could tame, yielded to Noelle, when she simply approached it and began to interact calmly. It seemed incredible. The emperor said the horse's name was Leah, meaning red earth. He offered Noelle a pet, and she happily accepted the gesture. Noelle thanked him, smiling shyly for such a generous gift. She felt special, receiving such a unique horse from the emperor. On the day of the hunting competition, Lucas noticed that this year all the participants were well prepared. The atmosphere was tense, as everyone was expecting a spectacular spectacle. At the competition, they saw Ms. Knoll sitting on a horse. Everyone noticed that she looked confident and beautiful, unlike the other competitors who seemed less prepared. Lucas was greatly surprised to discover that the horse the mistress was riding was Leah. This was the same horse that even he had been unable to tame, and now she obeyed Noelle. He was stunned. It was impossible for Lucas to understand how Noelle had managed to tame such a wild horse. Many had tried and failed. This was truly an extraordinary case. The gentleman said it all happened because she was the Princess of Tortilla. However, Ilya, though he seemed cruel, was far more ferocious than the wildest horse. The emperor proposed a hunting contest, and everyone began preparing for the race. The tension was mounting, and everyone was determined to win, including Noelle, who looked like a worthy opponent. Full speed ahead! The emperor was fired up for a good competition, and his entire team was equally determined to win. Everyone was expecting a spectacle that would amaze and delight. In Eris's tent, Cain considered the situation thoughtfully. He believed he needed to prevent Ms. Knoll from advancing further before she gained a strong position in the competition. His sister asked him again, not understanding his intentions. She reminded him that His Highness was also participating in the competition and could influence the outcome. The boy was confident he wouldn't harm anyone if he acted decisively. He was ready to fulfill his role and was even prepared to do everything to prevent Noelle from going any further. The girl trusted only her brother and promised to cover for him if necessary. She insisted that he ensure that Madame Noelle never appeared in the palace again. The boy reassured her, telling her not to worry. He promised to convey the knight's orders as soon as the signal was given, and everything would proceed without delay. The prince was astonished to learn that his brother had arrived for the hunt so early. It was unexpected, but he knew it was bound to happen this way. The younger brother couldn't understand why the market was almost empty. He assumed most people had come to see the woman rumored to be there. The boy was surprised and asked again which woman they were talking about. He heard that they were talking about the red-haired Acasis, who was quite famous among the inhabitants of Kairos. She was a woman from Tortilla. Red hair was rare among the inhabitants of Kairos, and such people always attracted attention. Rumors circulated that she was the emperor's favorite, a fact that even the servants knew about. Everyone was talking about it, and it only heightened interest in her. The younger brother was surprised to learn that the emperor, and therefore his brother, had a favorite. This changed many things in the eyes of those around him. The prince was shocked. He knew the emperor's daughter was known for her bad temper, and her behavior had never been admired. But this situation was completely different. This time, however, it wasn't the emperor's daughter. The first princess of Tortilla had arrived, the only daughter of Jade Niers, a woman they hadn't previously known about. The man was amazed when the servant confirmed that instead of the emperor's daughter, it was indeed the first princess of Tortilla who had arrived, which was completely unexpected. A servant reported that Tortilla's first princess had arrived in place of the emperor's daughter. This was a momentous event that could influence all subsequent events in the empire. Sierra told her mistress that an imperial knight had brought a letter from the emperor himself. This letter was supposed to be important and contained crucial instructions. The servant read the letter. It stated that the emperor wished to convey his attention and concern to Madame Noelle, emphasizing her special position at court. Eris noticed that the emperor seemed to miss his Acasis, and this was evident in his letter. The servant in turn drew conclusions from the knight's epaulette. The servant noticed that he was a genuine imperial knight, and Lady Noel decided to go with him. Everything happened so unexpectedly and quickly, but the knight shouted that the maid should know her place. Noel asked him to wait, as she planned to return soon, unwilling to leave the place where she was awaited. The servants agreed that no one would dare impersonate the emperor. It was treason, and those who remained silent were to be punished just as much as those who had impersonated him. Aris, perplexed, could not understand who could pretend to be the emperor, but everyone had to treat his love with caution, because such things undermine trust. The lady noticed they would soon see the boots, and said they had to go. She asked the knight to accompany her, while she prepared herself for the unknown journey. Aris wished her luck on her journey. The lady, realizing the gravity of the situation, noticed they were going the wrong way. She sensed something was wrong, but couldn't figure out what. The knight confidently replied that they were heading in the right direction, but soon they surrounded her with swords. Everything happened quickly, and the lady realized her plan had been exposed. She hadn't expected the knights to trap her so easily, but she remained calm. Their actions seemed too obvious to her, and she already guessed what was happening. The knights were amazed by her resilience. They had heard that she was unwavering, but they hadn't expected her to react so calmly to a threat. It spoke volumes of her confidence and determination. Noel decided she wouldn't give in, and as before wasn't intimidated by the threat. She thought they didn't realize how dangerous the game they were playing was. She knew she came from a barbaric country, and such threats were nothing new. But she wasn't about to simply give in, even if she was currently in the most dangerous situation. The situation became more tense. Noel realized that the valley of death awaited her, and that things wouldn't be as simple as they thought. She was ready to fight to the end. "I don't think you yet understand how serious your mistake is," Noel said confidently. She felt the tension rising and was prepared for any consequences. In response to their threats, Noel pulled out a knife and tore off part of her skirt, demonstrating her resolve. She knew it could be risky, but she felt she had to act boldly. The knight informed His Highness that Madame Noel had been absent for over an hour. The Emperor ordered Carlson to tell him in more detail. An hour ago, a letter from His Majesty was delivered, and she went alone to meet him. It was strange, so later she followed the lady and found the lady's horse tied up at the edge of the forest. He asked which part of the forest she was heading towards. The knight merely pointed in the direction she had gone. The Emperor ordered Lucas to prepare immediately, and he was ready to accept his instructions without wasting time. His actions were swift and precise. The Emperor gave orders to take Freck with him, and they would set out in search of Akasis, determined to quickly and effectively complete the important task that had been set before them. After leaving the palace, they headed into the forest. Ivan noticed that the situation didn't resemble a typical hunting competition, which made him uneasy. Everything seemed strange. Something unexpected must have happened, because the forest was silent. Suddenly, they saw Freck, and everyone began to wonder what could have happened and what awaited them. The man was greatly surprised when he saw Emperor Ivan himself. It was completely unexpected, and he tried to comprehend what exactly was happening at that moment. While the bodyguard was treating Freck, it was discovered that Akasis had gone missing. They were tasked with finding her, which further complicated the situation and presented them with a crucial task. Ivan asked where exactly she might have disappeared. The boy replied that she could be found in this part of the forest, giving them a new starting point for their search and further action. The servant informed the Emperor that he had a bad feeling. This feeling of unease and uncertainty greatly troubled him, making him wary. They finally found her, but the place was littered with slain knights. The woman, unarmed, managed to defeat an entire squad of armored soldiers, which impressed everyone. Lucas was stunned by what he saw. He had thought such a thing impossible. The lady simply smiled at the Emperor, as if it were nothing special, as if it were a normal occurrence. The woman remarked that she hadn't expected his arrival. The Emperor asked from whom she had learned to wield a sword like that, sparking an interest in her abilities and training. Noel replied that she had been taught by a man. The Emperor was surprised, and remarked that she should retrain to improve her skill and technique. Her arm was damaged due to improper use of techniques, which worried the Emperor. He noted that this could become a serious problem for her in the future. Noel, oblivious to the blood and the surrounding chaos, calmly continued fighting. She wasn't bothered by it, and she felt no regret for her actions. Everyone was annoyed that she remained calm and unresponsive. She dealt with the mercenaries on her own, without needing any outside help. What she truly feared was how he would look at her, as he did everyone else. With disgust, this thought tormented her, and she feared his judgment. The Emperor couldn't understand how she could show her legs to others. He felt she needed protection, and put his coat on her to hide her imperfections. But none of his actions stemmed from disgust or consolation, as one might think. Rather, his demeanor was bold and decisive, reflecting his desire to protect her. The girl explained that she felt uncomfortable moving, so she did it. It was her way of coping, and she was met with the same attitude again. She admitted that when her life was in danger, she couldn't remain simple. At that moment, she felt relief realizing that her actions were justified. The emperor said he didn't like it when she was harmed without his knowledge. However, if she was well, he wouldn't interfere, though his concern remained. Avon thought it was indeed Noel. Her personality and actions were just as he remembered, and he realized with surprise that she had remained the same. The servant hoped the emperor was mistaken, and that such situations would not happen again. He sought a way to prevent further consequences and minimize the risks. He wouldn't let this matter go unnoticed today. Someone had dared to attack a cacique right under his nose, and he wasn't about to let it go unpunished. The girl turned to the emperor, saying that this had happened because of her. She asked him to let her deal with the situation herself, so that all problems would be resolved on her terms. The emperor replied that her problems were now his problems. However, as emperor, he promised to punish anyone who dared to lay a sword on his woman in his country. 3. The lady responded that she shouldn't be like that. The emperor couldn't understand what she was talking about, and this only increased his bewilderment at her words. Noel was also angry, but at the moment, there was no clear evidence to blame those responsible for what was happening. Everything was too confusing. 3. Just recently, they said they would begin construction of a water canal. This incident should not interfere with the national project, which was important for the entire country. If they made a mistake, the nobles who had rallied around the family might retaliate. This was a serious warning that needed to be heeded. 3. To exact revenge on the family. The right moment had to be waited for. Noel was certain this event had nothing to do with her, so as not to complicate the situation. She didn't want the emperor to go down in history as a tyrant, so she asked him to entrust the matter to her. This was her wish, and she hoped for his understanding. Yet she remained unharmed. The emperor noticed that something was wrong, and she was clearly not completely well, which worried him most. Instead of continuing the conversation, she had a request. The emperor was surprised and asked again, trying to understand what she meant. The girl began to imagine Aris kneeling before her, begging for forgiveness. This image in her head made her smile, but it was no less unsettling. They said goodbye, and the emperor recalled how she had asked him for the dagger in the carriage. It was a strange and intriguing moment, one he remembered. Since a sword was pointed at her, she had to respond appropriately. This was her way of defending herself, and she knew she had to act decisively. The emperor agreed, but now he thought she clearly resembled her father. Her actions and thinking were logical, confirming her upbringing and character. She knew who could be worshipped and who could be avoided, and she always acted in accordance with these principles, which spoke of her clear understanding of the world. Even though she told him to wait, he knew he had to warn them. It was important to not miss the chance to intervene in time. When they arrived at the scene, Arn informed the emperor that Akasis had tasked him with covering up the matter. This was new information that complicated the task. The emperor grabbed a spear and threw it at the man. He didn't understand what was happening, but he was willing to listen to his instructions and understand the situation. The gentleman said he needed to know his limits and that there would be no second chances. He gave a clear warning, which the boy remembered, promising not to make any more mistakes. He told Cain this, and the boy promised to remember this lesson. It was an important reminder for everyone who dealt with the emperor. At the feast, Noel pulled out a dagger. Aris was terrified by this gesture, realizing the situation had escalated and could end badly. The girl started asking what she was doing. Noel forced her to her knees, clearly showing who was in charge, and that she was ready to take decisive action. She noted that Aris seemed unaware of the barbarian woman's skill with a knife. This was important to understand how dangerous she could be. Aris, realizing her mistake, began to beg for mercy. She was ready to admit her guilt, hoping that her life would be spared. Noel was surprised that Aris realized what she had done wrong. It showed she was capable of taking responsibility for her actions. Aris said in a trembling voice that she had done everything correctly and asked Noel to put the knife away. She hoped everything would end peacefully, without further complications. Noel remarked that she thought she could kill her using mercenaries. Eris denied this, claiming it was a mistake and that she had no involvement. Noel asked her to listen carefully. If Eris wanted to kill her, she should take the sword and finish the job, but if not, it was best not to try. She warned that if Eris tried anything again, there would be consequences. Every action she took would be strictly assessed. She allowed the tea party to continue, deciding it was time to stop there. Then she left the room, leaving everyone in a cloud of uncertainty. The knight asked the lady if everything was all right. Noel replied that she was fine, just a little tired, but there were no serious consequences. The maid informed her that she had a bath ready for her. Noel thanked her, relieved that she would be able to get some rest after everything she had been through. She sank into the water, trying to relax. It seemed the scent of blood no longer haunted her, and she was able to calm down a bit after the events she had experienced. Her skin had become flushed, and she decided to go outside as about an hour had already passed. This was necessary to tidy herself up and freshen up. She asked the maid to bring her a dress, but no one answered, which surprised her, as she hadn't expected her request to go unheeded. At that moment, the Emperor emerged from the darkness. Noel, seeing him, screamed and asked what he was doing there, not expecting him to appear in this place. The Emperor said she herself had asked for the dress to be brought. That was his explanation, but it didn't satisfy her, and she couldn't understand why he had come. Noel asked if that was really the only reason he'd come here. He replied that of course, not that his visit had an entirely different purpose. Inquiring, she asked why he had come. The Emperor, surprised, asked if she really didn't understand the reasons for his actions. He picked her up and carried her into the room. Noel thought he'd finished the hunting competition and could now devote his attention to more personal matters. The Emperor said he was almost done with the competition. Noel asked who had won, trying to learn more about the event and the outcome of the hunt. Ethan asked her what she thought. He suggested that perhaps he was the one who had won, poking fun at her expectations and cryptic hints. Noel asked if he was hurt. The Emperor replied that she should have asked her, since she was the one in danger. When he pulled her dress down a little to examine her wounds, she became very embarrassed. It was an awkward moment that made her feel uneasy. He wanted to make sure she was okay. That was his concern, and he wanted to make sure she wasn't hurt by checking her condition with his own eyes. He noticed the bruise and kissed it. It was his way of showing concern and affection, though she couldn't understand why he did it. Noel said it was just a light blow and that she had some other scratches. She tried to minimize the significance of the incident so as not to worry him. She had injuries on her legs too, and she felt embarrassed when he kissed her wounds. It was awkward and made her feel uncomfortable. The Emperor told her to relax and not worry. He asked if she had expected anything different, which had caused her confusion and embarrassment. He began kissing her passionately, and she couldn't help but breathe heavily, her body responding to his touch. Each touch seemed to penetrate her soul. The Emperor, seeing her confusion, asked her not to allow anyone but him to leave marks on her body, protecting her from strangers' touches. Only he could leave marks on her skin. Every touch had to be special, but despite his desire, she asked him to stop. The gentleman admired her complex nature and said that she was incredible, after which they kissed again, as if for a moment forgetting about everything around them. He turned to her, offering her a choice: stop or continue. It was difficult to discern her choice, but her eyes spoke louder than words. There was passion in her gaze, and her body radiated hot waves of arousal, unabashedly wanting. Her every movement was filled with power and readiness. He could achieve anything with a single word: the stern and majestic Emperor of Kairos. With his authority, he could overcome any obstacle, but only with her consent. The knowledge that he was waiting for her answer changed her mood. Anger and the thirst for revenge vanished, giving way to new feelings. She told him to continue. She let him do whatever he wanted with her, so he carefully laid her down on the bed, feeling her surrender to the moment. The gentleman began to undress. His words were firm. Now she will not be able to escape everything that happens. She must experience here with him. Noel covered her body with her arms, trying to protect herself, but he asked her in a soft, insistent tone to look at him without looking away. The girl felt that it was unfair, because she could not afford anything, did not understand what was happening, and had no control over the situation. She felt as if she was losing this struggle, but the emperor noted that it was not yet clear who was actually losing. He too is limited in his actions. He can't afford everything he wants. He took her hand and placed it on his chest, feeling her heart. He had never been so vulnerable, and now for the last time, he asked her permission to continue waiting for her clear answer. His Majesty pronounced her name without leaving any room for doubt, the sound of the word filled with respect and attention. She explained that, in Tortilla, when people of the opposite sex call each other by their first names, it means they have become lovers. She wondered why he addressed her by name every time. It was always new to her, unfamiliar, but not unpleasant. It wasn't that she didn't like it, but the very thought of him calling her by name somehow stirred her feelings, creating a new response. She tried to resist, tried to push him away, but in the end it was useless. Her strength was on his side at that moment. This was her man, her emperor, her lover, and there was no doubt about it. She was ready to acknowledge his power and her affection. She woke up in the morning and noticed that His Majesty was no longer there. She thought he had already left, and only the silence around her suggested it. Her back ached from the awkward position, and she wondered if he had done his business and left her once his desire had been satisfied. The maid came to see if her mistress was awake. She was holding fresh flowers, which she brought to clear her head. Noelle said she could come in now. The maid and Saratov entered with bouquets, preparing to deliver a message from His Majesty. Sarah, greeting her mistress, said that these flowers were for a cassis from His Majesty, who already knew her preferences better than anyone. He remembered all her little whims and quirks, better than anything she thought was important, even more thoroughly than decorative ornaments. Sarah congratulated her mistress on her first wedding night spent with His Majesty, expressing her best wishes for this new stage of her life. The girl couldn't understand how exactly they had learned of her secret, because she was sure she had done everything right to hide it. Doubts tormented her, unable to comprehend the situation. Sarah quickly noticed that her mistress wasn't so stupid as to be unaware of the nights she'd spent with His Majesty. It was obvious to everyone around her, but not everyone discussed it openly. The lady felt a slight shyness, and her cheeks flushed with embarrassment. The palace was bustling with life, bustling with bustle and passion, especially in those places where future heirs might be born. Noel thought that all these rumors meant one thing. The palace was engulfed in this question because its inhabitants were deeply concerned about her relationship with the emperor, which became obvious even from their attention. Since she'd first heard about it from the head maid, it confirmed that rumors were indeed spreading. Everything fell into place, and she realized just how noticeable she was here. But fortunately, this information remained confined to her palace, and she could be confident that her entourage had been carefully selected. This gave her some peace of mind in this tense situation. That's why she decided to be grateful to her loyal servants for their support and keeping her secrets. She understood that their loyalty was of the utmost importance to her at this moment. The mistress asked Sarah to get down to business. She wasn't naive enough to think the maid had come here without a reason, without a hidden agenda she was willing to reveal. The maid explained that from the moment she arrived at the imperial palace, she had attracted the attention of not only the emperor, but everyone around her. She became the object of interest for all the courtiers. As a stranger from the northern lands, she aroused curiosity, and her status as a princess only added to the mystery. Everyone around her was eager to learn more about her, and this created additional pressure. Moreover, she managed to win the emperor's heart, something no one else had managed. This fact only increased the attention paid to her and earned her respect, and sometimes even envy among the courtiers. In such circumstances, it was impossible to remain in the shadows. She realized her every move was being watched, and she couldn't help but notice the growing attention being paid to everything she did. The mistress assumed Sarah was trying to emphasize yesterday's events, and the maid confirmed her thoughts. However, this was not surprising. The situation was more than expected. But the way the emperor was confused, and despite this quickly dealt with the situation, confirmed that His Majesty was still paying attention to her every step. It's an undeniable fact that Akasis had to learn to protect herself as the palace was full of dangers. She couldn't rely solely on others, especially in times like these. Sierra, the maid, boldly expressed the idea that even the emperor couldn't protect her from all possible threats. He was powerful, but even his influence was limited. To protect herself, she must be strong enough. In the example of the Akasis, Molb the maid demonstrated that only personal strength can guarantee safety in such a harsh environment. Noel pointed out that Sierra was right, but she couldn't help but admit that it would be a challenge for her. After all, she came from far away and had to learn everything from scratch. She felt she had more to say. Sarah clearly hadn't finished her thought, and perhaps there were more important details to be heard. The maid added that there was one way to increase her power: to become Caroline the Empress. It was not just a proposal, but a vital step for her survival in the palace. Caroline was the emperor's legal wife, the Empress, and this status granted her special protection that other women in the palace did not have. It was the surest path to safety. When the emperor tried to convince her, she rejected him, citing revenge. However, now her decision had changed, and another reason was making her think about it. The sword held over her, and her image as a monster were a terrifying reality. Every day her life was in danger, and it haunted her. Everyone who looked at her was looking for weakness, and there were too many enemies. She understood that only a strong stance could help her survive in this cruel world. Clenching her fists, the girl decided that if she became queen, even the emperor wouldn't be able to protect her. She realized that to survive, she needed to become strong. She declared that she had no intention of becoming empress. She explained that for the Akasis, like everyone else, the palace offered two limited means of survival: becoming empress, giving birth to a prince, and then securing her status as crown princess and future empress. This was the only path Sierra could offer for her survival. This was the last piece of advice she could give her mistress to ensure her safety. Only through power and protection could she secure her future. The lady asked Sarah to wait and ask why she was doing her such a favor. The question was important, and she couldn't help but ask it. Sarah asked again if there was a reason for this. The lady recalled that she had always heard of the palace's strict laws and knew that she did not interfere in the struggles between the Akasis. However, from the very beginning, Sarah showed kindness towards her, and this could not help but raise questions. The lady did not understand the meaning behind this attitude. Sarah replied that there is no good in the world without a reason, and bowed. The lady remained perplexed, unsure of what exactly lay behind her words and actions. The men began whispering that the emperor had also visited Akasis Noel's palace the day before. This was odd, since everyone knew how carefully her secrets were guarded. Lucas noticed that the emperor seemed to be in a good mood that day, but no one knew exactly what was the reason for this behavior. The emperor asked again if everything was as he had been told, and his servant Aaron confirmed it. The situation was under control, and everything was going according to plan. Now the emperor could rest a little, although Ethan remained in thought, wondering whether Noel liked his actions and what consequences this visit would have. Ethan also wanted to find out what had happened to Ivan, as there had been no news about him. He continued to worry about the fate of this important man. The servant, eager to discuss the matter, said that Ivan had probably returned to the capital, but his whereabouts were unknown. He could be somewhere in the surrounding area. At that moment, First Prince Ivan Apolius Kairos entered the office. His appearance was unexpected, and everyone present took notice. He reported that he had carried out the emperor's orders and returned to the palace as duty required. This was an important message, one that had been awaited at the palace. Ivan, returning, knew he had much to tell his emperor. Even in the palace, he was absorbed in work and duties. The general, noticing his arrival, said he had thought so. He offered a detailed report on the current situation in the northern region, which required special attention. Sarah then reminded me again that there is no good in the world without a reason, but the lady couldn't understand what exactly she meant. Everything remained a mystery. They hadn't met before, and the maid was delighted to finally meet her mistress. She invited her to see something amazing. She asked her to look at what was so beautiful. Noel agreed that it was truly worth looking at, like a painting. Noel agreed that it was worth going beyond the palace to see the beauty around her. However, she understood her limitations. Noel paused, but her maid quickly pointed out that of course she couldn't leave the palace. It was against the rules. At that moment, a man appeared behind her and said that if she really wanted to, she could go. This was a surprising offer for her. He explained that there was no reason why she couldn't leave the palace. It was a curious remark that made her think. The lady turned, hearing footsteps behind her, and asked who was standing behind her. It was the first prince of Kairos, Ivan Apolius, Kairos, and his appearance somewhat surprised her. Ivan greeted the lady with the utmost respect, emphasizing her status as a worthy representative of this country, showing respect for her high position. She, without showing any particular surprise, simply extended her hand, to which Ivan kissed it, observing all the accepted rules of etiquette and respecting her personal space. Ivan noticed that she remained the same as before, while the lady did not understand what he was talking about, not seeing the changes that he would like to note. Ivan said they hadn't seen each other for a long time. The lady didn't understand why he emphasized the length of their separation and asked him to be more careful with his words so as not to offend her. He, breaking the distance, called her by her first name, which provoked a sharp reaction from the lady. She ordered him not to speak her name again without permission, demanding respect for her customs. It reminded her of the time when the emperor also called her by her first name, something only lovers could do in her native culture, which added to her feeling of awkwardness. Ivan believed that he had the right to call her simply Ria, which frightened the lady since she did not allow such close treatment, not approving of his habit. He said that she had become even more beautiful, to which the girl, holding back her emotions, asked him not to call her that anymore, because it seemed unnecessary and inappropriate to her. For Ivan, Rias sounded too long, but despite her request, he still did not allow himself to call her anything else, which irritated the lady. He continued to insist that he call her Ria. The lady, trying to remain calm, replied that he could do as he saw fit, but she did not approve of such address. He felt that she had agreed, and ignoring her doubts, he said goodbye to her joyfully, but he knew that her feelings were still unclear. Noel, turning to Ivan, reminded him that she was now an Akasis, a representative of the emperor, and that he was now a brother and subject of his majesty, and her patience was exhausted. She couldn't stand his disrespectful behavior any longer, and declared it wouldn't continue. Ivan was shocked and promised that such behavior would only be temporary, but the lady, remaining adamant, told him that he should get out of her way and not interfere with her anymore, to which Ivan only bowed, not knowing how else to react. Ivan was confused, not knowing what to say, and yet bowing low, he said that they would definitely meet again, hoping for the possibility of changing her attitude. He noticed that her sternness knew no bounds, and was surprised at how unyielding she was, which confirmed her firmness in decisions and dislike of his manners. Noel, meanwhile, was wondering if it was possible that His Highness had actually called her, and was greatly shocked when she saw him, not expecting to meet in such a context. The lady asked curiously what was going on, to which the emperor replied that he had simply invited her in and inspect the documents without revealing all the details of the situation. There were files on the table about Tortilla, including information about her arrival in Kairos. Noel felt her involvement in this matter could be important for further action. The emperor noted that the information could not be obtained without going there in person and examining all the details. He also asked who exactly had done this, assuming he knew someone. Noel, after asking him what he meant by love, immediately realized that the emperor might suspect her of jealousy, which surprised her greatly, since she did not experience such feelings. She couldn't understand what jealousy there could be, since those who had sworn allegiance to the emperor were General Lucas and Sir Aaron. It was surprising to her that there was anyone else. The emperor said that his words were not a joke, and assured that the people dearest and closest to him were his brother, who had never disappointed him with his devotion and loyalty. Ivan Kairos, the emperor's brother, was his pillar of strength and support. The emperor had confidence in him, believing he was always honest and never let him down in the most difficult situations. Remembering her father's words that Emperor George's actions always had their own motives, she thought that the general should be prepared for anything, but in her heart, she still believed in her brother. The emperor noticed how attentively she listened to him and asked why she was looking at him that way. She suspected there were errors in the documents, but decided not to mention her doubts. She wondered if the emperor's trust in his brother was excessive, considering that her father had also been devoted to his brother. She wondered if he was too naive in his expectations. She couldn't know what his brother was really thinking, and she wondered if she should reveal her own thoughts. Perhaps she shouldn't interfere with this family history and its secrets. In the end, she decided it was none of her business and simply said nothing of the sort was happening. She didn't want to delve into these matters, leaving them to the emperor's conscience. However, she noted that she wondered if he'd actually invited her to view the documents. Everything seemed so confusing, and she couldn't help but wonder. That night was full of anticipation, and she wondered if the emperor might have other plans. But perhaps his intentions were truly related to the documents, and she didn't know what to think. The emperor, approaching her unexpectedly, grabbed her in his arms, saying that perhaps this was the reason for her visit. He decided that she deserved a little attention and care. He carried her to his room and remarked that he was curious to see how she would like the gifts this time, hoping that they would leave a pleasant impression and be received with joy. The lady smelled roses, and her face flushed with embarrassment. She was touched by his attention, but at the same time, she felt awkward about such obvious signs of attention. The emperor smiled and said he would stop there. However, this time, she seemed genuinely pleased with the gifts, and she made no secret of her pleasure. The lady, despite her embarrassment, noticed that there were too many roses, and the palace was filled with their fragrance. Everything around seemed engulfed in this scent, leaving barely room to breathe. The gentleman, noticing the scent emanating from her body, said that it was probably the very aroma that surrounded her. This confirmed that her attention was completely focused on his gestures. He asked if her body was okay, but the lady replied that she didn't care about the pain. She was always willing to take responsibility for her decisions, despite the discomfort. She understood very well that all the consequences of her decisions lay on her conscience and holding back her emotions. She asked again what he was talking about, trying to understand the true motives behind his questions. Ethan said that she would soon discover a new world, which he said would be nothing like what she had experienced, before promising her incredible sensations and experiences. The emperor asked again if he had woken her. The lady replied that he had not. She had not yet woken up, which meant she could sleep a little longer if she wished. He added that if she wanted to continue resting, she could close her eyes and go back to sleep. Noel, however, reported that she had difficulty breathing when he was lying on top of her. She noticed that she woke up early at dawn. She was curious about what the emperor usually did at this time. She wanted to know what he did every morning, while the rest of the world was still asleep. The emperor explained that he usually practices fencing in the mornings. If Lucas is already awake, they fight each other, practicing their martial arts skills. She said she'd also like to watch these training sessions, especially the battle between the emperor and General Lucas. She'd love to see them fight. She also admitted that she had never seen the emperor wield a sword. She had never witnessed his martial arts, and that was what truly interested her. They say the emperor is the finest swordsman. He himself remarked that he too would like to see how she wields a sword, to see how she handles such a weapon. She asked in surprise if he was joking. The lady laughed, but her eyes sparkled with genuine interest. It was unexpected, and she herself didn't know what she was really thinking. Then she remembered holding a dagger. That experience was significant to her, and it was linked to memories of her past trials that she couldn't forget. The lady asked the emperor why he hadn't inquired about what had happened that day. It was a momentous occasion for her, and she was curious why he hadn't yet broached the subject. The emperor, clearly confused, asked her why she'd suddenly thought of it. Whatever the reason, she remained loyal and devoted to him, but she was still curious. She noticed that the rumors about her, while terrifying, were greatly exaggerated. Bad stories are always distorted, but she always believed the situation itself was worse than it was described. She said they tried to kill her, and that was almost the same as murder. There was no need to go into detail about it, because she had been through a lot, and it was hard to argue with that. The emperor reminded her that it was he who had ordered that the wound not be left on the body. She obediently followed his instructions as always, but that didn't mean she was completely at peace about it. The gentleman couldn't figure out what else to ask his woman. He felt like everything had been said in their conversation, and he didn't know what else to say. Noelle hugged him, smiling. She remembered her father's words when he first gave her a sword. It was a moment that would always remain in her heart and define her relationship with weapons. Her father told her that a sword, like any weapon, could take someone's life. She had to handle it carefully, mindful of the consequences of every blow. He was always on the front lines of war and insisted that killing brings remorse. These words remained in her memory as an important lesson from the one who was her mentor and hero. If the moment came when she had to kill, she would think twice. Finding a way to solve a problem without violence was a crucial part of her upbringing and her philosophy of life. He didn't want to put such a burden on her, but she couldn't follow all his instructions, no matter how hard she tried. These thoughts haunted her because she was herself. In reality, it was all simply self-preservation. She acted not out of malice, but out of necessity, protecting herself and those dear to her. Noelle savored the moment when she held a sword in her hands for the first time in a long time. The sensation was unusual, but it gave her a sense of power and control she hadn't felt in a long time. In Tortilla, she had to use her sword in extremely stressful situations, but even in those moments when she had to defend herself, this feeling gave her confidence. As she swung her sword, she felt her mind losing its clarity, and she was afraid others would notice. It was a strange feeling, and she wasn't sure how it would be received. The emperor thought she wasn't too dependent on the opinions of others. She was a strong woman, but she felt insecure, and he noticed this despite her confidence. She replied that this was not true. Her greatest fear was that the emperor, having seen her dark side, would begin to look at her differently, that he might change his attitude toward her. The master confidently declared that this would not happen. She was a cacice, the daughter of the god of war. Her red hair resembled a sunset, and her eyes were like rubies. Unusual and beautiful. Noelle Rias' eyes redder than rubies. She couldn't be a monster, and if anyone was wrong, it was him for failing to protect her when she needed to, and she was forced to act. The lady approached him with this question, but the emperor said that this place had often been the site of assassination attempts on emperors and their descendants. Survival here was difficult, and they knew it was true. To survive, one had to be willing to take up the sword. The emperor assured her that this was not her fault and that he never blamed her for these actions. She was forced to act this way because there was no other choice in this place. It was a painful lesson, but reality dictated its own terms. He hugged her tighter, confirming his words. He didn't blame her and was ready to support her in any difficult situation, no matter how it unfolded. The lady continued to train in fencing, with the knight honing her skills. She was determined and self-confident, and this helped her succeed. She won another duel. She noticed that her eyes had been right. Sierra's sword was straightforward and honest, and its wielder was also a strong fighter. Acacius had won, and the maid was delighted. It had been an impressive battle, and she couldn't hide her delight at the skill she had witnessed. She watched with interest as the emperor and Lucas trained. He was lucky, having witnessed the emperor's fencing skills firsthand. The lady was surprised to see the general arrive. Ivan announced that he was also present, and it was a moment that could not leave her indifferent, so she greeted His Highness. It was important to her, and she showed politeness and respect as always in such situations. Lucas had long been asking the prince to fight him, but now he had changed his mind. He wanted Acacius as his opponent, as he considered him the strongest. Noelle realized she was no match for the general. She hadn't wielded a sword in years, and her skills weren't up to the task of defeating such an experienced fighter. The gentleman reassured her, saying there was no need to talk like that. He simply wanted to have a little fun and enjoy the moment, with her not expecting a serious fight. Noelle agreed that there would be another time. Ivan watched, feeling their relationship grow ever warmer and more trusting. The lady hadn't actually picked up a sword in a long time, and she was a little ashamed of her skills. She felt she needed to work hard to be worthy. She decided that once she'd honed her skills, she'd ask the general to fight her herself. He noticed her determination and offered to fight her next time. The lady didn't mind. She said that if they were to fight, they would need to clear a space for his duel, so that everything would be done properly. Ivan asked if she'd like to fight him. He was willing to offer himself to assess her skills and see how much she'd improved over time. He said that he was probably the best person for the task because he could help her assess how well she had mastered the sword and how ready she was for the challenge. Noelle was surprised and asked what he meant. Ivan then remarked that she seemed nervous and afraid she wouldn't win the upcoming duel. Ivan added that everyone has such doubts, and Noelle, it seems, does not even understand why he speaks such a strange and unusual language for her, like the language of Tortilla. Noelle asked him, puzzled, if he thought that, having spent just one day near the war in the north, he was now ready for any challenge and did not value his life. Ivan calmly noted that such feelings were normal, and so the lady instructed him to remain silent and draw his sword to begin training. The gentleman said that he seemed to be reminiscing about old times and called her Ria again as he had in the past, which did not go unnoticed and surprised Noelle. Noelle smiled and told him not to try to cheer her up. She'd tried her best, but despite her best efforts, she couldn't defeat him in this fight. Ivan said that anger creates a gap in her defenses, and she needs to be careful and vigilant because emotions can weaken her at the most critical moment. She, of course, did not forget the words of her mentor, who warned her about the importance of controlling her emotions in order not to become vulnerable in battle. That same day at Lady Soie's, the lady began to suspect that something was wrong with Noel. Her behavior and mood were clearly not in order, which caused concern. The lady asked again what was going on, and Soie, having examined her carefully, noticed that the girl's face clearly showed signs of a bad mood, which could not go unnoticed. Noel said that nothing like that happened, but Soie added that the girl was constantly dropping things and her face had become pale, which was really alarming. Noel explained that her mood is not that bad. It's just that one person is causing her unpleasant feelings that she can't hide. The lady was surprised by her words, but Noel confirmed that despite everything he does, she simply does not want to see him anymore and does not want to communicate with him. Soie thought that it was probably related to Aris's Akasis, but the lady quickly dismissed this idea, saying that the reasons for her dissatisfaction lay elsewhere. She added that it was a different person, selfish and cowardly, who had greatly disappointed her by causing such strong emotions. The woman noted that if she really thought so, then the reasons for this must be very compelling, and she probably had her own explanations for it. However, Soie advised against showing her emotions so openly, as it could be dangerous and could affect her attitude towards other people. The lady asked her what she meant, and Soie explained that she was one of those people whose emotions were easily read on her face, and this could be her weak point. Soie expressed concern that this could harm her in the future, especially in situations where she needs to remain calm and not show her feelings outwardly. Noel said that despite this, she tries to control her emotions so as not to show them too clearly in her interactions with this person with whom she has a tense relationship. The lady thought that she should become as calm and balanced as Lady Soie, so as not to let her emotions influence her behavior. The lady said she was quite calm at the moment, but Noel disagreed and felt that she was actually much more nervous than she would like to admit. Incidentally, the towel she was currently wearing was made by Heather, and Noel noticed it right away because the fabric was really high quality. Noel added that she immediately noticed Heather's signature work and agreed that it was indeed her style, as the fabric was very nice and high quality. It was her favorite fabric. Heather really put a lot of effort into creating this towel, and it was perfectly in her nature to always strive for the highest quality. The soft fabric so popular in Carrie Rose's social circles was renowned for its unusual texture. Noel had heard that its production was a true art and a labor-intensive process. She had several rolls of the fabric herself, so she could choose her favorite color to make something similar for herself if she wanted. However, Noel refused, saying that there were already dozens of rolls of silk in the warehouse, and she did not need more, especially since the selection was already too large. Soie assumed that these fabrics were a gift from Her Majesty, and the lady confirmed her guess, explaining that it was indeed a gift from the king. Noel was a little embarrassed, and when Soie asked, said that everything was fine, although her reaction made it clear that she had not asked the king about their relationship. Noel confirmed that she doesn't really care what people think about her relationship with the king, because for her, it's not the most important thing in life. She admitted that she might have her reasons for doing this, and that you can't always get what you want, even if you really want it. Noel would be lying if she said she wasn't curious, but at the same time, she knew her relationship with this man was far more important to her than any rumors. She noted that if everything were the way she wanted, she would hardly feel the way she does now, when everything around seems tense and difficult. She remembered how she fought with Ivan, how hard she tried to defeat him, but he turned out to be much stronger and was able to win despite her efforts. He defeated her, and the father noted with surprise that this guy really knew how to fight, and the victory over his daughter was not an accident. This boy, who easily defeated his daughter, was a man who could have become a great warrior, but his name remained unknown to many, Jade thought that perhaps he would like to become his disciple, as this young man had unique abilities and prospects for the future. Being the only disciple of the god of war, Jade noticed that the boy was surprised by such an opportunity because he never even dreamed of becoming a disciple of such a great master. Memories of the past often come to his mind when he sees it, and it brings back strong feelings that never go away, reminding him of that time. These feelings were her first love, and it was Ivan Apuleius Kairos, whose name became an integral part of her life and heart, despite everything that happened. Sua tries to get her to come over any time. Next time, she'll make her favorite tea. Noel agreed and said that she had a very interesting time with her today. But then Swak noticed that her mother had come to visit her. She didn't understand why she was there. Noel greeted the lady and remarked that she was glad to meet her. The lady also greeted the Cassis and said that she had heard that her daughter owed a lot to her. Noel flew up saying that she owed her a lot, that Sua always listened to her complaints. Sua turned to her mother and said it was rude, but her mother said there was nothing wrong with it. The girl believed that her mother was nevertheless entirely wrong. Noel had noticed, because without her, she would have been very lonely, so she was very glad to have a good friend. The Duchess said that after her daughter started talking, she lost her smile, but at some point she started smiling again. She means that it happened after meeting a Cassis Noel. The girl said that her mother's words were true. Mother didn't tell anyone, but she worries day and night so that she doesn't suffer anymore. Noel noted that it was difficult for her, but the woman said that she could only thank Akasis Noel. The Duchess said she would certainly repay her favor. The lady said there was no need since it wasn't a favor at all. She says you told me that this means they will always protect Ms. Noel. The Celtics promised to protect her, and the lady assured her that in the future, a situation would definitely arise when they would be able to show their help and support her at the right moment. At that moment, she asked Noel to always remember their family, as their support would be invaluable in any circumstances when she needed help. As long as the Celtic family exists, a casus, Noel will never be alone in Kairos. Her family will always be nearby, ready to help at any moment. Noel replied that there was no need to exaggerate so much, and that she didn't need to pay for such favors. She believed the Duchess was doing it more out of duty than genuine need. However, it would be extremely impolite and rude to refuse the Duchess her favor and not accept her offer, as this could lead to discontent. Noel remembered the words about how the Celts would always be with her. These words left a feeling of certainty in her heart, that she would not be alone no matter what. The servant, turning to Ivan, remarked that he seemed to be in a very good mood today, but the master replied that this was not so, which caused the servant to panic a little. It was clear that General Lucas was serious in his intentions. Aaron, standing nearby, greeted His Highness, expressing respect for the high military command. After this, he turned to the general to greet him as well, demonstrating respect for his superior and maintaining an atmosphere of mutual respect. The servant was surprised and noted that despite Lucas's high status as a general, he still had to respect the imperial family, especially in such official situations. The prince, reassuring the servant, said that everything was fine and that he should not worry since his relationship with General Lucas was at a high level of mutual understanding. Ivan was on his way to see His Majesty the Emperor, when Lucas, turning to him, mentioned that he had heard about the recent fight with the Casus Noel, which piqued his interest. He wondered if it was possible that they had met before, as he was surprised by how clearly and harmoniously they repelled attacks in battle, demonstrating a high level of skill. Lucas grew angry, declaring that he was telling only the truth and couldn't understand why his remarks could be taken with doubt. He was confident in his observation. Those who saw them in battle immediately realized that they had fought together many times. And what is important, they were not just training partners, but were as close as the emperor's only beloved. The first prince's servant, hearing these words, was stunned and asked what kind of nonsense he was talking about, not understanding what could have prompted the general to voice such revelations. Ivan asked Colin to calm down. He knows what is bothering the general and his assistant. Aaron was sure that he didn't know what kind of attention she was getting in the palace, or what the situation was like now. Wherever she goes, invisible eyes and ears focus on her. Not long ago, His Majesty even witnessed an attempt on her life. They provoked her in broad daylight in the imperial palace and forced her to clash swords with the first prince of Kairos. He doesn't know that this could put her, and even the emperor himself, in danger. They certainly don't know where the relationship between the two of them was when His Highness arrived in the north. While the eyes and ears of the imperial palace are always and everywhere open, even if they are not visible, Ivan said that it seemed he had made a mistake. He understood perfectly well what they were worried about. Aaron told the prince that if his mood had worsened, he asked for forgiveness. The prince said that they were saying this out of loyalty to the emperor, so he had nothing to say. But it was time to go. His Majesty was calling him.